So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to see what if Harry was son of Loki. So this will be movie, and don't worry, I will be not hosting the whole video. So you can skip the intro and enjoy the other part of the video. And if you are new on channel, then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also you can suggest me some stories ideas so I can work on it, and you can give feedback on this story too. So let's jump right into the video.
Privet Drive always smelled like rules. Not rules written down, no. The Dursleys didn't bother with paper. Their rules lived in the air, in the way the curtains were always perfectly shut at the same angle, in the way the doormats said welcome, but the house felt like it was allergic to visitors, in the way Vernon Dursley's mustache twitched whenever Harry existed too loudly. Harry had learned early that survival wasn't about strength. It was about timing. It was about knowing when Dudley was bored, when Aunt Petunia's hands were too busy with dishes to slap, when Uncle Vernon had reached that dangerous point in his evening where the television was loud enough to drown out his conscience. It was about watching faces, about hearing what people didn't say. Sometimes, when he lay in the cupboard under the stairs and listened to the house breathe above him, Harry imagined the world as a board game. Not chess was too neat. People were messy. People panicked. People lied, even to themselves. No, it was something else. A game with hidden cards. A game where everyone pretended they weren't playing. Harry liked games like that. Because in games like that, a boy with nothing could still win. He just had to be clever. The strange thing about mirrors. The mirror came to him the way most things did at Privet Drive, by accident, and because no one cared enough to stop it. It was a hot afternoon that had gone sour with thunderclouds. Petunia had sent Harry out back to sort the rubbish properly, which meant, do something unpleasant while we pretend you don't exist. A cracked vanity mirror had been thrown into the bin Dudley's, probably. Dudley went through phases the way normal people went through socks. Last month, it had been computer games. This month, it was his own reflection, like he was practicing being impressed with himself. The mirror was still in its frame, except one corner had spiderweb cracks running through it. Harry should have left it. Instead, he pulled it out carefully, wiping his thumb over the glass. The crack pattern shifted under his touch, as if it was alive. Not moving mirrors didn't move, but changing the way the light sat inside it. Harry frowned. He tilted it toward the gray sky. And for just a moment, he didn't see his face. He saw a serpent, a thin, looping shape made of lines like knotted rope, biting its own tail. It wasn't drawn on the mirror, and it wasn't reflected behind him. It was there, as if the glass remembered it. Harry sucked in a breath and jerked the mirror away. His reflection snapped back into place: messy black hair, too thin face, those bright green eyes that always looked like they were waiting for something. But the serpent hadn't been a trick of the light. He was sure of it. He looked around the yard, half expecting Petunia to be standing in the doorway with that pinched expression, accusing him of making trouble. No one. Thunder grumbled. Harry looked back down. The glass showed him again. Just him. Just a boy with hand-me-down clothes and a lightning-shaped scar in a life that didn't belong to him. He moved his head slightly. The serpent didn't show. Harry exhaled slowly, annoyed at how fast his heart had started doing that ridiculous thing. It was a mirror, a broken mirror. That was all. He should put it back. He didn't. He slid it under his shirt, the cool frame pressing against his ribs, and carried on sorting rubbish as if the world hadn't blinked. That night, when the house finally quieted, when Dudley's snoring became steady and Vernon's television went off with a harsh click, Harry lay in the cupboard and pulled the mirror out. He'd hidden it under a loose floorboard. He'd always had little hiding places, like a squirrel preparing for winter. Little private pockets of mine in a house that was never his. He held the mirror up in the dark. At first, it was only shadows. Then the serpent returned. Not on the glass in it. It curled around his reflection, slow and patient, as if it had been waiting for him to look. The knotwork shimmered faintly, green gold, the color of poison disguised as jewelry. Harry stared. His mouth went dry. "Who are you?" he whispered because the cupboard felt suddenly like it was listening. The serpent's symbol tightened, and the mirror went cold enough to sting. Harry flinched, and the cracks in the glass, those spiderweb fractures, seemed to widen, like eyelids opening. Then his reflection shifted, not into someone else, into something that wasn't quite him. His eyes looked older, sharper. The green brightened into something nearer to emerald, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw a faint gold flicker beneath his pupils, like sparks in a forge. Harry's breath caught, and the mirror answered, not with words, with a sensation, like laughter heard through water, like someone smiling behind him when he was alone. The cupboard shrank around him, suddenly too small, too human, too ordinary for whatever was pressing through that glass. Harry tried to put the mirror down. His fingers wouldn't let go. The serpent's symbol flared. The cracks filled with darkness, and the world tilted out from under him. The dream that wasn't a dream. Harry fell without falling. One moment he was in the cupboard, the next he was standing on a shoreline that didn't belong on Earth. The sand was black, glittering like crushed obsidian. The sea was darker, still ink thick enough to swallow stars. Above him, the sky was a bruise of swirling violet and stormy green, stitched with lightning that crawled slowly like a living thing. Harry's stomach turned. He turned in a circle, searching for anything familiar. There was none. Only the sound of waves that didn't break, but hissed like whispered secrets. "Careful," a voice said gently from behind him. "People often mistake fear for truth." Hadi Spoon. A man stood a few steps away, as if he'd been there the entire time and was only now allowing Harry to notice him. He was tall, taller than any man Harry had ever seen in real life, and dressed in layered green and black, leather and cloth, with gold threading that caught the lightning like it was made for it. His hair was dark and slicked back, and his smile was the kind you wanted to trust right up until you remembered you'd been warned not to. His eyes were the most unsettling part. They weren't simply blue or green or brown. They were clever. Like the color didn't matter, because the real danger was that those eyes looked like they could see through skin and bone and straight into the choices you hadn't made yet. Harry's throat tightened. "Who are you?" he asked again, louder this time. Braver, because he'd had practice at bravery. Privet Drive demanded it. The man's smile widened, delighted. "Oh," he said, as if Harry had just said something adorable. "That is the correct question. Most people begin with screaming." Harry didn't scream. He swallowed. "You started this," Harry said, and surprised himself with how steady his voice was. "With a mirror." The man lifted one hand, palm up, and a faint green light gathered above it like mist being pulled into shape. "A mirror is never just a mirror," he said. "It is a doorway, a confession, a weapon. It depends on who is holding it." The green mist twisted, becoming a tiny serpent that coiled around his fingers, then vanished like smoke. Harry stared, a cold feeling slipping down his spine. Magic. Not the accidental, weird magic that happened around him, sometimes hair growing back, glass disappearing at the zoo. This was intentional, controlled, elegant. Harry clenched his hands at his sides. "Are you a wizard?" The man laughed softly, almost fondly. "Oh, little mortal," he said. "Your world is full of boxes. Wizard, Muggle, good, evil, Gryffindor, Slytherin." He tilted his head. "And you poor boy, you've lived your life in a box, so small you had to fold yourself to fit." Harry's face heated, anger rising like a match struck in darkness. "How do you?" "I know many things," the man said smoothly. "I know what you've been told. I know what you've been denied. I know what you've survived." Harry's scar tingled. Not pain, never pain like before, but a pressure like someone pressing a finger to it thoughtfully. The man noticed. Of course he did. He stepped closer, boots silent on the black sand. Harry didn't back away. He didn't want to. That was the worst part. The man's presence felt familiar, in the way a shadow can feel familiar when you've lived in darkness long enough. I will answer you, the man said, voice soft now, like he was sharing a bedtime story. But first tell me, Harry, do you know why you're alive? Harry's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories. Petunia had hissed things when she thought Harry wasn't listening. That thing on his forehead. Freakish. Like her. Alive. Like it was a miracle that required explanation. Harry began. The man's smile sharpened. You know the legend, he said. The boy who lived. Harry's jaw tightened. I don't know anything. Oh, you know enough, the man murmured. Enough to be curious. Enough to be dangerous. Harry didn't like the way that sounded. Who are you? The man's gaze locked with his. Then he bowed, theatrical and mocking and somehow honest in its own twisted way. I'm Loki, he said, of Asgard, son of Laufey. Brother, he paused, smiling like he'd nearly made a joke only he understood, to those who would prefer I didn't exist. Harry stared. The name rang inside him like a bell struck deep underwater. Loki. Not a wizard name. Not British. Not anything Harry had ever heard on television. But it fit the serpent. It fit the laughter. It fit the feeling that the world was about to be rearranged. Harry's lips parted. Why are you? Loki lifted a hand, and the air between them shimmered. A memory unfolded like smoke. A woman with red hair, laughing in sunlight. A man with messy black hair, spinning her around. A cottage. A night. Green light. Harry's scar burned briefly, and he gasped. The images vanished, leaving only the black sea and Loki's watchful eyes. Harry clenched his fists. Did you kill them? Loki blinked, and for the first time something like genuine surprise crossed his face. Then he laughed, and the sound was warmer, strangely. Pleased. Oh, Loki said, good. You have teeth. Harry didn't relax. Loki's expression softened into something more careful. No, Loki said, I did not kill them. Harry's breath came out shaky. Then why are you here? Loki stepped closer, close enough that Harry could see the fine lines of gold embroidery on his sleeves, close enough that he could smell something crisp and cold winter air, metal, distant storms. I am here, Loki said quietly, because you are mine. Harry's blood turned to ice. No, Harry snapped, immediate and fierce. I'm not. Loki's smile didn't falter. A predictable response. Harry's voice rose. My mom and dad. Yes, Loki said smoothly. Lily and James. Brave. Loyal. Human in the way humans insist on being. He tilted his head. They loved you. That part is true. Harry's throat tightened. Then the world lied to you, Loki said, and there was a flicker of something colder in his eyes. Something ancient. Or perhaps it's simply omitted. Harry shook his head hard. You're lying. Loki placed a hand over his own chest, mock offended. Me? Never. Harry glared. Loki's smile turned almost proud. There it is. The instinct to doubt. A gift. Harry hated how steady Loki looked, how unbothered. Like this was a conversation he'd had 1,000 times, and Harry was simply reciting his expected lines. Explain, Harry demanded, because he refused to beg. Loki's gaze held his. Your mother, Loki said slowly, was a woman caught in a war she didn't ask for. A war of prophecies and monsters. She did what clever people do when trapped. Harry's stomach sank. She made a bargain, Loki continued, voice velvet smooth. A bargain for a weapon that wouldn't look like a weapon. A child who could slip through the cracks of fate. Harry's mouth went dry. Love protected you, Loki said almost gently. Her blood made a shield. But her blood alone did not make you. Harry's chest tightened painfully. So you're saying, you. Loki's smile returned, thin as a blade. I am your father, he said. The words hit like a punch. Harry staggered back a step, the black sand crunching under his shoes. No, he whispered, and it came out like a plea despite his anger. Loki watched him with quiet fascination, like a scientist observing an experiment. Harry's mind raced. Lies. Tricks. This was a trick. It had to be. But the serpent symbol. The mirror. The way his accidental magic had always felt like something watching. His scar tingled again, not like warning, but like recognition. Harry swallowed hard. Why? Why will my mom? Loki's expression flickered something unreadable past through it. Because she was brave, he said softly, and because she was desperate. Harry's stomach churned, nausea rising. And because, Loki added, voice becoming bright again, she loved you enough to stain her hands with a choice no one would forgive. Harry's hand shook. He hated the way Loki said it, like it was romantic, like it was fun. So I'm just a weapon? Harry spat. Loki's eyes gleamed. You're many things, Loki said. Weapon, warning, wound, wonder. Harry's face burned. And you just show up now? After 11 years? Loki spread his hands. I have been occupied. You abandoned me. Loki's smile faded slightly. Do you believe, Loki asked calmly, that you would have survived if I had come to collect you? Harry hesitated. Loki stepped closer, voice quieter now, like a confession. Your world has eyes, Loki said. Old eyes. Suspicious eyes. If they had known what you were, they would have either chained you or crowned you. Both are cages. Harry's throat tightened. Loki's gaze sharpened again, like he was done being gentle. So I hid you, Loki said, in the safest place no one would look, in plain sight, under the noses of the dullest people alive. Harry flinched, because the insult landed too close to his daily reality. And I waited, Loki continued, until you were old enough to understand that survival is not a gift. Harry's voice came out strained. Then why now? Loki's eyes flicked to the sky, where green lightning crawled like veins. Because the letter comes, Loki said. Harry froze. How do you? Loki smiled. I know the taste of destiny. It is very theatrical. Harry's heart hammered. Hogwarts. The place he'd heard Petunia whisper about. The place she hated like it had stolen Lily from her. Loki's gaze pinned him. You're in a castle full of children trained to believe in categories, Loki said. A castle that has been at war with itself for 1,000 years and calls it tradition. Harry's stomach twisted. And you, Loki said, stepping closer, voice smooth as silk, are going to walk into the center of it with my blood in your veins. Harry's hands curled into fists. What do you want? There it was. The real question. Loki's smile widened, delighted. Ah, he said, now you're speaking like my son. Harry hated how the words sent a chill down his spine. Loki circled him slowly, like he was inspecting a blade he'd had forged and finally collected. I want you to live, Loki said, and Harry almost believed him until Loki added, and I want you to learn. Learn what? Loki stopped in front of him and lifted a hand. Green light gathered, faint and shimmering, like a veil. Magic is not power, Loki said softly. Magic is influence. It is the art of making the world agree with you. The green veil rippled, then shaped itself into a simple illusion. A small bird perched on Loki's palm, its feathers glinting gold. Harry stared. The bird blinked, tilted its head. It looked real. Loki's eyes met Harry's. Touch it. Harry hesitated, then reached out. His fingers brushed the bird and passed through mist. The bird vanished instantly, the illusion collapsing like a popped bubble. Harry jerked his hand back. Loki smiled like a teacher who'd proven a point. Glamour, Loki said, a lie made beautiful, useful, fragile. He lifted his fingers, and a second illusion formed, this time not a bird, but a coin. Gold, stamped with symbols Harry didn't recognize. Now, Loki murmured, watch. He flicked the coin toward the black sand. It landed with a soft clink. Harry's eyes widened. It stayed. He crouched, grabbed it. Cold metal. Real weight. He stared up at Loki. Loki's smile was razor thin. Seer, he said, almost reverent. The weaving of what is seen and what is believed. Harry looked down at the coin again. Then the coin dissolved in his palm into green smoke. Harry sucked in a breath. Loki's eyes gleamed. Not mind control, Harry. Not domination. He leaned in slightly. Just persuasion. A nudge. A suggestion that becomes someone else's idea. Harry's stomach sank. He could picture it too easily. Dudley convinced he'd heard a teacher call him stupid. Vernon certain he'd seen Harry stealing. Petunia sure she'd caught him smiling at her in a way she hated. Harry swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? Loki's voice softened. Because you'll be surrounded by predators. Harry's scar tingled again. And because, Loki added, you're going to decide what kind of predator you are. Harry's hand shook. He hated that his mind was already trying to sort this into advantages, into strategies, into survival. Loki watched him with satisfaction. Good, he murmured. You understand. Harry's voice came out tight. I didn't agree to any bargain. Loki's smile tilted. No. Harry stared. But you will, Loki said, voice silk over steel. Because you are alive. Because you are curious. Because you have been starving in a cupboard and dreaming of control. Harry flinched. Loki's eyes sharpened. Tell me, Harry, do you want to be helpless again? Harry's mouth opened. No sound came out. Because the answer was a screaming, furious no. Loki stepped back, satisfied. You don't have to love me, Loki said lightly, as if that was a joke. Love is overrated, but you will not deny what you are. Harry swallowed hard. What am I? Loki's smile widened, bright and dangerous. You are the son of a god of mischief, Loki said, and you're about to walk into a school that prides itself on rivalry. He leaned in, voice a whisper now, intimate as a secret. And you, Loki said, are going to learn how to pull strings without anyone seeing your hands. Harry's stomach twisted, because a part of him, an ugly, wounded part, wanted that. Wanted it so badly it scared him. And if I refuse? Harry asked, forcing the words out. Loki's eyes glittered. Then you will still be my son, Loki said. You will still have my blood, and the world will still push you into a story. He stepped back, spreading his arms as the black sea hissed. But you, Loki said, can choose whether you are a hero in someone else's legend, or the author of your own. The sky's lightning flared. The serpent's symbol burned in the air. Harry's scar pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and the dream began to fold. Loki's voice followed him as everything dissolved into darkness. Remember this, Harry. Truth is a weapon, use it carefully. Waking up with a secret. Harry jolted upright in the cupboard, gasping. The mirror lay on the floor beside him. Its cracked glass dim again, just a mirror. Just broken. His hands were shaking. He touched his scar. It didn't hurt. It felt awake. The cupboard felt smaller than ever. Above him, the house was silent. Harry stared at the mirror. His reflection stared back. Except, if he angled it just right, if he caught the exact slant of moonlight through the crack under the door. He saw it. The serpent knot. Faint now, like an afterimage. Like a watermark on his life. Harry swallowed hard. He didn't know what to believe. But he knew this. If Loki was telling the truth, then Harry had spent 11 years being treated like nothing. And there was a whole world out there that had built a legend on his name without ever asking what he wanted. Harry's breath steadied. His mind, annoyingly, efficiently, began to organize the chaos into questions. If Lily made a bargain, what did she bargain for? Protection? Power? An escape from prophecy? What did Loki get out of it? And why did his scar tingle when Loki talked about predators? Harry stared at the mirror. Slowly, carefully, he lifted it. In the cracked glass, he watched his own face. Then he tried something that felt ridiculous. He imagined Dudley's face. He imagined it with a pig snout because Dudley had once made pig noises at him for an entire week, and Harry's spite was personal. Harry narrowed his eyes. He didn't say a spell. He didn't even know any. He just wanted the image to exist. For a heartbeat, the mirror shimmered. Dudley's pig snout face flickered in the reflection in perfect blurry. And then the entire mirror went cold and Harry's head slammed with sudden pain, like he'd been punched from the inside. Harry hissed, dropping the mirror. The pain faded quickly, leaving a dull throb. Harry pressed his palm to his forehead, breathing hard. So it was real, and it had limits. He looked down at the mirror again, heart hammering. A power that could lie convincingly. A power that could nudge people. A power that could ruin lives with whispers and evidence. Harry swallowed. He thought of Aunt Petunia's tight mouth, Uncle Vernon's booming rage, Dudley's laughing cruelty. For the first time in his life, Harry imagined a world where they could be made small. Not by fists, by fear. The thought scared him. The thought thrilled him. Harry shut his eyes. No, not fear. Control. He needed control. He needed to learn. Upstairs, a door banged open. Boy, Uncle Vernon roared. Get up, now. Harry's eyes snapped open. He shoved the mirror under the loose floorboard so fast his fingers scraped wood, then crawled out of the cupboard, heart still racing. He climbed the stairs, stepping lightly. Petunia was in the kitchen, already angry, already flustered, like she'd woken up offended by the concept of mourning. Vernon stood by the table, holding something in his thick hands. An envelope. Yellowed. Thick. And addressed in green ink. Harry froze. Because for a heartbeat, he swore the ink shimmered. Like it had been written with a smile. Vernon's eyes bulged. What is this? Harry's throat tightened. Petunia's face went pale, like someone had slapped her with a memory. She whispered, almost soundlessly, no. The envelope slid slightly in Vernon's grip. Harry saw the seal. A crest. A lion, an eagle, a badger, a snake. And beneath it, for the briefest moment, a tiny loop of knotted serpent that looked like it didn't belong there at all. Harry's scar tingled. Not warning. Recognition. Vernon's voice rose. Who's been sending you letters? Harry stared at the envelope like it might bite him. Like it might open and swallow his life whole. And somewhere in the back of his mind, like a chuckle behind glass, he heard Loki's voice. The letter comes. Harry swallowed. Then he lifted his chin, because he'd had practice facing monsters. I don't know, he said, and it was almost true. But as he said it, Harry's eyes flicked to Petunia's face. And he saw something there he'd never seen before. Not disgust. Not annoyance. Fear. Real fear. Harry's heartbeat steadied. A secret formed in his chest like a blade being sharpened. He might not know the full truth yet, but he knew where to start pulling. And for the first time in Privet Drive, Harry smiled small, private, and sharp enough to cut. The journey to Hogwarts felt like stepping through a crack in the world. One moment Harry was standing on a crowded platform while his aunt pretended he didn't exist, clutching a trolley like it was the only solid thing in his life. The next, he was being swallowed by steam and noise and the strange, heady smell of coal and magic like burnt sugar and rain. Petunia had left him at King's Cross with a suitcase, a hard mouth, and instructions that sounded more like a curse than advice. Don't cause trouble, she'd said through clenched teeth. Trouble, Harry had learned, was a word people used when they didn't want to admit they were afraid. He pushed his trolley through the crowd, pretending he knew what he was doing. Everyone else seemed to have someone parents fussing with scarves, siblings laughing, friends calling out names. It was loud, and somehow that made Harry feel even more alone. He was standing there, staring at the train like it might explain itself, when someone barreled into him. Sorry, are you all right? A girl with bushy brown hair and frantic eyes grabbed his arm before he could stumble. Harry blinked. Yeah, she didn't let go immediately, like she was checking if he was real. I'm Hermione Granger, she said quickly. Have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville lost. No, Harry said. She looked him up and down, eyes catching on his glasses, his scar, the way people nearby kept glancing at him and whispering. Hermione's eyes widened. Oh, she breathed. You're Harry Potter. Harry's stomach tightened. He'd heard that tone before. Not from the Dursleys, they never said his name with wonder. But from shopkeepers in Diagon Alley, from strangers who stared like he was a relic in a museum. He hated it. Hermione's face lit up. I read all about you. Harry felt something stir at the back of his mind. Not the scar. Not pain. Something else. A nudge. A thought that wasn't quite his, sliding into place like a card being tucked into his hand. Use it. Harry swallowed. I'm just Harry, he said quietly. Hermione faltered, then nodded quickly, cheeks coloring. Right, sorry. Of course. Behind Hermione, a red-haired boy approached with an awkward shuffle, half dragging a trunk as if it had personally insulted him. Hi, he said, looking at Harry like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to speak. I'm Ron Weasley. Mum said if I couldn't find a seat, I should just. Well. He shrugged helplessly, ears going pink. Harry noticed the way Ron's eyes kept darting to his scar and then away, as if looking too long might be rude. Harry also noticed Hermione's posture straight, eager, already trying to prove she belonged here. And he noticed something else. The tiny social triangle forming before a single word was chosen carefully. 3 strangers. 3 potential allies. 3 potential pieces. Harry's stomach turned at the thought. But the thought didn't go away. Loki's voice silk and laughter echoed in his head. You will not deny what you are. Harry forced the feeling down. I've got a compartment, Harry said, if you want. Ron looked relieved. Hermione looked thrilled. They followed him down the corridor. Harry didn't know it yet, but the first move had been made. The first lesson, people want a story. As the train rattled forward, Harry sat by the window and watched the outside world blur into something unfamiliar. The inside of the compartment was warm, smelling of new trunks and sweets and nervous excitement. Ron pulled out a lumpy bag and offered Harry a sandwich. Hermione politely refused and immediately started talking about classes, books, and spell work as if Hogwarts was a test she intended to ace by force of will. Harry listened more than he spoke. He didn't need to speak, because he was learning. Ron's laughter came easy. He was loyal to the idea of friendship before he'd even experienced it properly, like he wanted to be someone's chosen person. Hermione was sharp and hungry not for food, but for certainty, for rules, for being right. She clung to knowledge like it could keep her safe. Harry understood that. Too well. He reached for a chocolate frog, mostly to have something to do with his hands, and unwrapped it carefully. The frog jumped. Ron yelped. Hermione scolded. Harry caught it on instinct. As the frog card slid out, Ron leaned over eagerly. Oh, who'd you get? Harry looked at the card. Albus Dumbledore. The picture winked. Ron whistled. Blimey. That's the best one. Hermione leaned forward, eyes bright. Dumbledore's done wonderful things alchemy, discovering the 12 uses of dragon's blood. Harry's scar tingled faintly at the name. Not pain. Again, recognition. Harry turned the card over, reading the text. Then something else happened. For a blink, just a blink, the words shifted. Not into nonsense. Into something older. Runes, curling like serpent knot patterns. Harry's breath caught. He blinked hard. The card was normal again. Hermione was still talking. Ron was still unwrapping another frog, looking pleased with himself. Harry's fingers tightened on the card. So it wasn't just the mirror. It wasn't just dreams. It was in him, woven into the world around him like a hidden thread. Harry slipped the card back into the stack and forced a calm he didn't fully feel. He looked at Hermione's eager face, Ron's open expression, and the other students passing in the corridor outside laughing, shoving, calling out names. Everyone here was excited. Everyone here wanted to belong. And Harry realized something with a quiet chill. If he wanted to bend this place, he wouldn't need to break anyone. He'd just have to give them the right story to believe. The sorting, where the castle divides itself. The boats glided across the black lake like ghosts. Hogwarts rose out of the darkness, towering and impossible, lit with golden windows like eyes. Harry felt a pull in his chest. Not just awe, recognition again, as if some part of him had been here before, or had dreamt it in a language he didn't know how to speak. In the great hall, candles floated overhead like patient stars. For long tables stretched across the floor, filled with students in black robes, murmuring like a living tide. At the staff table, teachers watched. McGonagall's sharp gaze swept the room like a blade. Snape's eyes lingered too long on Harry, dark and unreadable. And at the center, Dumbledore smiling, serene, as if he'd seen everything and still chose kindness. Harry's scar tingled again. Harry kept his face blank. The sorting hat sat on its stool like a tired animal. One by one, names were called. One by one, children sat and were judged. When Harry's name came Harry Potter, the entire hall shifted. Whispers surged. Harry felt eyes slam into him from every angle like physical weight. He walked forward, not too fast, not too slow. And he realized with almost amused disbelief. Hogwarts did the Dursleys' job for them. It made people watch him before they knew him. It made him a story before he was a person. Harry sat on the stool. The hat was lowered onto his head. Darkness swallowed his vision. A voice, old and close, spoke into his skull. Well, the hat murmured. Not the usual mess of nerves and hopes. No, this is interesting. Harry swallowed silently. The hat hummed. You have a mind that watches, it said. A mind that learns. A mind that plans. And underneath that, something I have not tasted in a long time. Harry's scalp prickled. Where did you come from, child? The hat whispered. Harry thought of the mirror. The serpent knot. The green lightning sky. The smile that wasn't safe. Don't tell it everything, a part of him warned. Harry formed a thought carefully. I'm Harry. The hat chuckled. Oh, you are, it said, amused. And you're also a storm with manners. Harry didn't move. The hat's voice dipped lower. There is ambition, it murmured. Not for gold, not for power, for control, for safety, for never being helpless again. Harry's throat tightened. There's cleverness, the hat continued, sharp enough to cut the hand that holds it. Harry's scar pulsed faintly. And there is the hat paused, voice becoming wary a strange thread in your magic. It tastes like tricks, like old oaths, like gods. Harry's breath caught. The hat went silent for a long moment. Then spoke again, carefully. This castle loves boxes, it said. It will try to put you in one. Harry didn't answer. He didn't trust his mind not to slip. The hat's voice turned almost gentle. You could do well in Slytherin, it whispered. Harry's stomach clenched instantly. Slytherin. He'd heard Draco Malfoy sneer on the train like it was a crown. He'd heard Hagrid's voice darken when he'd said the name. He'd seen the way everyone's eyes sharpened at the mention of it. Harry's mind flashed to Ron's face when Draco offered friendship Ron's immediate dislike, the line drawn before the game had even begun. If Harry went Slytherin, he would be alone. And worse, he would be expected to be a villain in everyone else's story. But if he went Gryffindor, he'd be embraced, protected, given a ready-made narrative. The hero. Harry swallowed. The hat whispered, almost teasing. Or perhaps you'd prefer Ravenclaw. Mine like yours would fit. Or Hufflepuff loyalty can be useful. Harry's jaw tightened. Harry thought of Loki's voice, a castle that has been at war with itself for 1,000 years and calls it tradition. Harry made his decision like a knife sliding into place. Gryffindor, he thought. There was a faint pause like the hat had heard something else beneath the word. Then it burst into a shout. Gryffindor. The hall erupted. Gryffindor table roared. Ron looked like he'd just exhaled a year of tension. Hermione clapped hard, beaming. Harry walked to the table, sat beside Ron, and smiled politely. Inside, he felt something settle. Not relief. Opportunity. Because Gryffindor was the lion's den, and he had just walked in with a serpent under his skin. The chess pieces. The first week of Hogwarts was a blur of stairs that moved, portraits that argued, and teachers who seemed to smell fear like perfume. Harry learned fast. Not spells, though he did learn those too. He learned patterns. Gryffindors sat like they owned the room, loud and fearless, and sometimes stupid in the way people are stupid when they feel safe. Slytherins moved like a school of fish together, graceful, always watching for weakness. Ravenclaws treated knowledge like currency. Hufflepuffs treated fairness like religion. And Hogwarts encouraged all of it. It fed them rivalry like it was breakfast. Harry saw it during breakfast when someone laughed too loudly at a Slytherin's mistake. He saw it in corridors where older students accidentally shoulder-checked younger ones if the colors on their tie were wrong. He saw it in how professors spoke. McGonagall praised bravery like it was the only virtue. Snape praised cunning like it was proof of superiority. Even the walls seemed to lean into it, as if the castle itself enjoyed watching children become factions. Harry listened. He watched. And slowly, the names began to stick in his mind, not as friends, but as forces. Ron Weasley, loyal, impulsive, a fuse looking for a spark. Hermione Granger, brilliant, rule-bound, desperate to be respected. Seamus Finnegan, loud, eager, the kind who would repeat a rumor if it felt exciting. Lavender Brown, social spider, collecting whispers. Neville Longbottom, insecure, easily shaken, a perfect target for cruelty. Draco Malfoy, pride in human form, and pride was easy to steer. Pansy Parkinson, a laugh like a knife. A tall Slytherin boy with a calm expression who didn't laugh at Draco's jokes older, watching. Dangerous. And in Hufflepuff, a boy named Ernie Macmillan who spoke of principles in a voice that sounded like he expected applause. Ravenclaw had quieter pieces, a girl who always sat near the front, eyes sharp and measuring, and a boy who corrected teachers like it was sport. Harry didn't know them well yet, but he didn't need to. In games like this, knowing the shape of people mattered more than their names. The first whisper. The first manipulation was so small it could have been mistaken for accident. That was the point. It happened in potions. Snape stalked the front of the dungeon classroom like a bat in human skin. His gaze was a constant pressure, sliding over students, finding fault like it was a hobby. Harry sat beside Ron, Hermione on his other side. Snape's eyes landed on Harry like a pin. So, Snape drawled, voice like oil are new. Celebrity. The word celebrity was sharp enough to draw blood. Harry felt Ron stiffen beside him. Snape's eyes flicked briefly to Ron, then back to Harry. Tell me, Potter, Snape said, can you name the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? Harry's mouth went dry. Hermione's hand shot up immediately, practically vibrating. Harry didn't look at her. He felt something stir again, that subtle pressure in his mind. Let them see you stumble. Let them underestimate you. Harry forced himself to meet Snape's gaze. I don't know, sir, Harry said. Snape's lip curled faintly. Pity. A few Slytherins snickered. Ron's ears turned red. Hermione looked horrified, as if Harry had committed a crime. Snape turned away, satisfied. And Harry felt at the ripple. Gryffindors bristling. Slytherin's amused. The room divided itself with a single sentence. Harry could have left it there. You should have. But then Snape's voice cut again. Perhaps fame is not everything. Ron muttered under his breath, "Git." Snape spun, eyes flashing. What was that, Weasley? Ron froze. Nothing, sir. Snape's gaze was cold. Detention. Tonight. Hermione inhaled sharply. Professor. Snape's eyes snapped to her. 10 points from Gryffindor for insolence. Harry felt it, the anger, the heat rising. Not just Ron, not just Hermione. The Gryffindors in the class. They were all staring at Snape now. And at the Slytherins, who looked smug. A spark had landed on dry grass. Harry's mind moved, quick and quiet. One nudge. Just one. Not to punish Snape. Harry wasn't stupid. Not to start a war yet. Just a test. Harry looked down at the cauldron, pretending to focus, and let that strange inner pressure slide out soft as breath. Not a spell. Not words. A suggestion aimed at the nearest Slytherin, who was smirking too openly, Draco Malfoy. Draco's grin widened. Then, as if the thought had bloomed in his own mind, he spoke a little too loud. Careful, Weasley, Draco said, smooth and sneering. Don't get angry. Wouldn't want to end up like your family, poor and common and loud. Ron's head snapped up. Hermione gasped. The Gryffindors went still, like a pack hearing a threat. Snape's mouth curved slightly, as if Draco had offered him a gift. Harry's stomach dropped. Because it worked. It worked too well. And now it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a knife drawn in public. Ron surged to his feet. Say that again. Sit, Snape snapped, and his voice cracked like a whip. Ron didn't sit. Seamus muttered, "Oh, here we go." Slytherins leaned forward like spectators at a show. Harry felt the tension spike too fast, too sharp. And for a flicker, he saw it like a board from above. Snape, pleased. Draco, smug. Ron, furious. Hermione, panicking. And Harry, sitting in the middle, hands still hovering near his cauldron like he was innocent. A chill slid through him. Because if this was easy, then everything else would be too. Snape's wand snapped up. Weasley. Ron froze at last, chest heaving. Snape's eyes raked over him, then flicked, just for a heartbeat, to Harry. Not with accusation. With suspicion. Like Snape had smelled something in the air and couldn't name it. Harry held his face blank, but his pulse raced. Snape's gaze narrowed. Then he turned back to Ron, voice deadly calm. Detention. And another 10 points from Gryffindor, Snape said. Perhaps you will learn silence. The bell rang seconds later, a mercy and a threat. Students scraped back chairs. Voices erupted. The class poured out like a shaken hive. Ron stormed toward the door, fists clenched. Hermione hurried after him, furious and anxious at once. Harry followed, quiet. His stomach twisted. That had been a test. And the castle had answered. The corridor lesson. Outside, Ron paced like an animal trapped in a small cage. I can't stand him, Ron snapped, talking about Snape, but looking like he meant Draco too. He hates us. He hates. He hates Harry, Hermione said sharply, then glanced at Harry as if remembering he was there. Sorry, but it's true. He singled you out. Ron turned to Harry, anger softening into something protective. It's not your fault, mate. Harry felt that odd pressure stir again. Because Ron's loyalty was real. And real loyalty was rare. And rare things could be used. Harry swallowed hard and pushed the thought away like it was poison. You want a reaction, Harry said instead. Careful. Snape. Hermione nodded quickly. Exactly. He provoked Ron so he could punish Gryffindor. Ron scowled. Yeah, well, I gave him one. Harry watched Ron's face and noted the truth. Ron didn't regret it. He regretted losing, which meant Ron was predictable. Harry hated that his mind did that sorted his friends into tactics like it was the most natural thing in the world. Hermione's eyes narrowed suddenly. But Malfoy, he didn't have to say that. It was specific. Harry's chest tightened. Hermione was smart. Too smart. Harry forced a shrug. Malfoy likes being awful. Hermione didn't look convinced. But Ron snorted. That's Malfoy for you. Harry exhaled slowly. One nudge. One tiny push. And the entire room had shifted. Harry could feel the castle's appetite. The hat's warning. That night, Harry lay in his bed in the Gryffindor dormitory and stared up at the canopy. Seamus snored in the bed across from him. Neville mumbled in his sleep. Ron's breathing was slow and steady. The room was safe. Warm. A kind of safety Harry had never known. And still Harry couldn't sleep. Because in his mind, he kept replaying the moment Draco spoke. The way it had felt like pushing a marble and watching an avalanche follow. Harry lifted his hand, staring at his fingers as if they belonged to someone else. He hadn't cast a spell. He hadn't said anything. He just wanted Draco to speak. And Draco had. Harry swallowed. A soft tap came at the window. Harry's head snapped up. An owl perched outside, staring in. It carried a small envelope. Harry's heart thudded. He slipped out of bed quietly, padded across the room, and opened the window. The owl hopped inside, shoved the envelope into his hand, then took off again without waiting. Harry stared at the envelope. No Hogwarts, no school crest, just a simple symbol pressed into the wax. A knotted serpent biting its own tail. Harry's throat went dry. He cracked the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a single line of writing in elegant slanted script. Good. Now do it without leaving fingerprints. Harry's hands went cold. He didn't need a signature. He could hear the smile behind the words. Harry folded the note slowly, his mind racing. Loki was watching. Not always. Not openly. But enough. Harry stared at the sleeping boys around him. Friends. Not pawns. Not pieces. Friends. Harry clenched the note in his fist until it crumpled. He whispered into the dark, so softly no one could hear. I'm not your weapon. The shadows didn't answer. But somewhere far away, or inside him, or both, Harry felt laughter like a ripple against glass. And he understood with a chill. Hogwarts wasn't just a school. It was a battlefield of pride and perception. And he had just discovered he could turn perception into a blade. The question was whether he could control the blade, or whether the blade would control him. Hogwarts didn't teach rivalry. It served it. Like pumpkin juice at breakfast, bottomless, cheerful, and somehow mandatory. Harry noticed it in the little things first. The way Gryffindors cheered louder when Slytherins lost a point than when they gained one. The way Ravenclaws corrected people with a smile that meant I'm better than you. The way Hufflepuffs watched everything with the quiet judgment of a courtroom that hadn't decided your sentence yet. And Slytherin. Slytherin didn't cheer. Slytherin measured. At breakfast on Monday, Draco Malfoy sat like he'd paid rent for the Great Hall. Crabbe and Goyle flanked him like furniture with fists. Pansy Parkinson laughed too sharply at everything he said, as if laughing was a form of loyalty. Harry could feel Draco's eyes on him, even when he didn't look up. He didn't need to. He knew. Fame was a leash people try to wrap around you. Hogwarts had 4 houses, but it only had one favorite sport. Deciding who you were before you open your mouth. Harry stabbed a piece of toast and tried to focus on normal things. Ron was complaining about staircases again. Hermione was lecturing him about how the stairs probably had a magical purpose, and he should stop calling them evil. Neville was listening with the expression of someone who'd just been told the floor might bite. Harry smiled faintly at that, then caught himself. Because every time he smiled lately, there was a second thought underneath it. A shadow thought. What can I make happen? Harry hated that thought, which meant, of course, he couldn't stop hearing it. The two-truth rule. The first week, he'd pushed Draco once in potions. A single nudge, a single sentence aimed like a dart. It had landed. It had landed too well. And the result had been immediate. Anger, points lost, Snape's attention sharpening like a blade. If Harry was going to survive the way Loki seemed to expect him to survive, he couldn't just shove pieces around and hope no one noticed. He needed a method, a rule. Harry found it the way he found most useful things, by watching people tell lies badly. People didn't believe lies because lies were convincing. People believed lies because lies were comfortable, because lies supported something they already wanted to feel. So Harry made himself a rule. Never build a lie from nothing. Build it from two truths. Truth 1, a thing people already suspect. Truth 2, a thing that looks like proof. Then you just give them a tiny push. The rest, Hogwarts did on its own. Crosshouse work, a perfect fault line. It started in charms. Professor Flitwick bounced into the room like a delighted bird, robes fluttering, eyes bright. Good morning, he squeaked. Today we begin a practical exercise. Teamwork, cooperation. A collective groan rolled through the classroom, soft but unmistakable. Flitwick either didn't notice or pretended not to. He clapped his hands. I will be pairing you, he said happily, and yes, some of you will be working with students from other houses. This time the groan was louder. Harry felt Ron stiffened beside him like someone had threatened to feed him to a dragon. Hermione looked intrigued, as if cross-house tension was an exciting academic study. The Slytherins looked offended on principle. Flitwick adjusted his glasses and began reading names. Mr. Weasley, with Miss Abbott. Ron's head snapped up. A Hufflepuff? Hannah Abbott, a blonde Hufflepuff girl, looked like she'd been handed a live ferret. She glanced at Ron with the same wary politeness you'd give a stranger holding a lit match. Hermione's eyebrow twitched. Ron, it's just a charm exercise. Ron muttered, yeah, and the staircases are just stairs. Flitwick continued. Miss Granger, with Mr. Goldstein. Anthony Goldstein, a Ravenclaw boy with thoughtful eyes, nodded politely. Hermione nodded back like she'd just been assigned her favorite subject. Harry felt something in his chest ease. Just slightly Hermione with a Ravenclaw made sense. She'd be safe in her element. Then Flitwick said, Mr. Potter, with Miss Bulstrode. Harry blinked. Millicent Bulstrode, a stocky Slytherin girl with a heavy scowl, stared at him like he'd personally insulted her breakfast. Ron made a strangled sound. No way. Pansy Parkinson snickered loudly. Draco smiled like Christmas had come early. Harry kept his face blank, but his mind shifted into that quiet, sharp focus he hated and needed. A cross-house pairing. In a room full of children trained to dislike each other. That wasn't a lesson. That was a spark tossed into a room full of dry paper. Flitwick beamed. Wonderful. Today you will practice the mending charm. You will repair simple objects, quills, cups, small decorative pieces. Work carefully. Help each other. Millicent sat down beside Harry with a thud, arms folded. Harry offered a polite smile. She didn't return it. You're Potter, she said flatly. Harry nodded. Yeah. Millicent snorted. Figures. That was it. No insult, no curse, no dramatic statement. Just a dismissal like a door shutting. Harry felt the familiar pressure in his head nudge her, soften her, make her behave. He didn't. He clenched his hands under the desk. Not because he couldn't, because he was trying desperately to prove to himself he didn't have to. Flitwick placed a cracked teacup on their table. Start with this one. Millicent stared at the cup like it was plotting against her. I'll do it. Harry watched. She raised her wand. Reparo, she said, clipped. The cup repaired itself in a clean, neat line. Harry blinked in surprise. Millicent's eyes flicked toward him, just for a moment checking if he'd noticed. Harry kept his expression neutral. Nice. Millicent's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. Then she looked away. Harry's mind filed it away instantly. Truth one, Millicent Bulstrode wasn't stupid. And if she wasn't stupid, she was dangerous in a different way than Draco. The setup. The trouble began when Flitwick announced the second half of the exercise. For the next part, he squeaked, "You will select an object from the classroom supply cabinet. Something broken. Something you will repair together. Please no fighting." The cabinet sat near the front of the room, full of oddities. Cracked ornaments, snapped quills, chipped goblets, torn cloth banners used for practice. Students lined up, mingling in a way that felt unnatural, like predators sharing water. Harry watched like he couldn't help it. A Ravenclaw girl reached into the cabinet for a cracked brass telescope piece, pulling out carefully. At the same time, a Slytherin boy, tall, older, calm, reached past her for something else. Their hands brushed. The Ravenclaw flinched as if she'd been touched by something unpleasant. The Slytherin boy smirked faintly, and his hand closed around a bundle of quills tied with blue ribbon Ravenclaw ribbon. The Ravenclaw girl's eyes widened. "Those are ours." "They're in the cabinet," the Slytherin said lazily, as if ownership was a joke. "They're labeled," she snapped, pointing. He shrugged, turning the bundle in his hand like it was entertainment. "Then perhaps you should guard your things better." A few Ravenclaws bristled. A few Slytherins snickered. Harry felt the board tilt. Here it was. The fault line. The teacher was distracted, hopping between tables, praising neat repairs. No one important was watching this little exchange. Except Harry. Harry's scar tingled, not pain, not warning. A pulse of attention. Like the castle itself leaned in. Harry's stomach tightened. He could ignore it. He could let it pass. But the thought slid into his mind like a whisper behind his ear. If you don't control the chaos, someone else will. Harry swallowed and made the smallest decision of his life that would have the biggest consequences. He stepped into the line casually, as if he was just another student choosing an object. Millicent followed, arms crossed, clearly irritated at being near so many people. Harry reached the cabinet. He didn't grab anything immediately. He waited. The tall Slytherin boy tucked the Ravenclaw ribbon bundle under his arm like he'd won it. The Ravenclaw girl clenched her jaw and turned away, furious, heading back to her table with nothing. Harry felt a strange heat in his chest. Not sympathy, not anger. Something worse. The satisfaction of seeing a predictable reaction. Ravenclaw pride, Slytherin entitlement. Two ingredients. All he needed was a match. Harry reached into the cabinet and pulled out a cracked wooden box with a tarnished latch. He turned it over. The bottom had been split cleanly, like something had slammed into it. Perfect. He carried it back to his table with Millicent. Millicent eyed the box. "That's rubbish." "It's practice," Harry said. She grunted. Harry set the box down, then carefully let his gaze drift toward the Ravenclaw table near the windows. Hermione was already deeply involved in her repair with Goldstein, talking fast enough to make the air vibrate. Ron, across the room, looked like he was forcing himself not to argue with Hannah Abbott. But the Ravenclaw girl who'd been at the cabinet sat stiffly, hands clenched, eyes locked on the bundle of ribbon quills, now sitting smugly on the Slytherin table. Harry watched her face. He didn't know her name. He didn't need to. He knew the expression. It was the expression of someone who wanted to be right and was furious the world was refusing to cooperate. Harry felt the pressure in his mind rise, subtle as a tide. He took a slow breath. He had a plan. A simple one. Truth one, a Slytherin really did take Ravenclaw property. Truth two, Ravenclaws would believe Slytherins were sabotaging them if they had evidence. And Harry would provide the evidence. Not by magic, By hands. No fingerprints. No obvious spills. Just placement. The move. Harry waited until Flitwick's attention was across the room. Then he spoke softly to Millicent, keeping his eyes on the cracked box. Do you mind if I borrow your wand for a second? He asked casually. Millicent blinked, suspicious. Why? Harry shrugged. My wands. Acting odd. I want to compare. It was nonsense. But it was the kind of nonsense that sounded plausible to someone who didn't care enough to argue. Millicent hesitated, then shoved her wand at him like she was annoyed to be involved. Harry's fingers closed around it. For a heartbeat, the wand felt heavy, unfamiliar. He didn't cast anything. He didn't need to. He just needed a reason to have Millicent's wand in his hand for 10 seconds. Thanks, Harry murmured, handing it back. Millicent snatched it, frowning deeper. Weird. Harry nodded, as if he agreed. Then he leaned down to adjust his shoelace, and while he did, his hand slipped under the table and tugged lightly at the tarnished latch of the wooden box. The latch clicked. The box lid lifted a fraction. Inside was nothing but dust and a small, broken piece of silver like part of a decorative clasp. Harry stared at it for one heartbeat. Then he felt the pressure in his mind surge. A tiny shimmer of green, barely visible, slid over the silver piece. Not making it into something else. Just making it easier to notice. Harry didn't need to create evidence. He just needed to highlight it. He closed the box quickly. Millicent didn't see. No one saw. Harry's head throbbed immediately, a dull ache behind his eyes like his mind was warning him not to get cocky. He swallowed and forced the ache down. Then he waited, because the next part required someone else to open the box. The spark. Time, Flitwick called cheerfully. Now, I'd like one student from each table to bring their chosen object forward so we can admire your repairs. A ripple of movement. Students stood. Millicent rolled her eyes. You do it. Harry blinked. Me? Millicent jabbed a finger at the box. You picked it. You show it off. Harry's stomach tightened, but he forced a calm nod. He lifted the box and carried it to the front along with other students holding repaired cups and snap quills. Flitwick clapped his hands. Wonderful. Now, Mr. Potter, what do we have here? Harry set the box down. He didn't open it. Flitwick did. The lid creaked up. Dust. Broken silver clasp. And then, Flitwick paused. His eyes narrowed behind his glasses. What's this? He murmured. He reached in and lifted the silver piece. It gleamed faintly in the candlelight, just enough to catch attention. A small crest was etched on it. A serpent. Slytherin. A few people leaned forward. A few whispers began. Flitwick looked puzzled. How odd. That doesn't belong in a classroom supply cabinet. The tall Slytherin boy who'd taken the Ravenclaw quills stiffened. Draco's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. The Ravenclaw girl's face went sharp with sudden certainty. Harry felt his pulse jump. The two truths were aligning. Flitwick, still confused, turned the clasp over. It seems broken. Perhaps it fell off a bag? Or, Professor, the Ravenclaw girl blurted, standing abruptly, chair scraping. That's a Slytherin clasp. Someone's been taking our things. The room went very still. Slytherin table bristled immediately. That's rubbish, Draco said coldly. Why would we want your quills? The Ravenclaw girl's eyes flashed. Because you already took them. Gasps. The tall Slytherin boy smirked faintly, as if enjoying the drama. Flitwick waved his hands frantically. Now, let's not. But the class had already split. Ravenclaws murmured angrily. Slytherins muttered insults under their breath. Gryffindors watched like it was entertainment until Draco's eyes flicked to Harry and narrowed with something like suspicion. Hufflepuffs looked uncomfortable, glancing around as if trying to determine who was right. Harry stood very still. Inside, the ache behind his eyes pulsed again, sharper now. This wasn't just a whisper. This was a fault line cracking open. Flitwick hurriedly placed the clasp on his desk. We will discuss this later. For now, everyone return to your seats. The Ravenclaw girl sat down stiffly, but her gaze burned. Draco's face was pale with irritation. Millicent glanced sideways at Harry, frowning as if she couldn't decide if she was impressed or annoyed. Harry's fingers tingled. Not with magic, with adrenaline. He'd done it. He'd created a conflict without casting a visible spell. No incantation. No wand movement. Just placement and a little shimmer of attention. And Hogwarts had done the rest. Rumor versus evidence. That should have been enough. But Hogwarts didn't stop at enough. Hogwarts took one moment and multiplied it until it became a narrative. By lunch, the story had grown teeth. Harry didn't even have to do much. Seamus Finnegan did it for him because Seamus treated gossip like sport. I heard Ravenclaw caught Slytherin stealing, Seamus said loudly at the Gryffindor table, eyes bright. Ron snorted. Good. Maybe someone should. Hermione's head snapped up. That's not good. That's awful. Stealing is. What Slytherin does, Ron muttered. Hermione glared at him. Ron. Harry watched Hermione's face, watched the way her mind tried to sort facts from emotion. Harry felt the pressure in his head again. A nudge could soften her, make her stop pushing, make her accept the simplest version. But Hermione wasn't a piece you shoved. Hermione was a knife you had to respect. Harry didn't nudge her. He just offered something that sounded reasonable. It could have been an accident, Harry said quietly. Ron stared at him like he'd grown horns. Mate, you're being too nice. Harry shrugged slightly. Maybe someone dropped it. Maybe it got mixed in. Hermione's expression eased a fraction. Exactly. We don't know. Ron grumbled, but the tension lowered, and Harry realized something with a strange twist in his stomach. He could manipulate people with lies, but he could also manipulate them with calm, with a single sentence that redirected the emotion. Influence wasn't always chaos. It was control. Then Lavender Brown slid onto the bench near them like she'd been invited by fate. Harry, she said breathlessly, is it true? Harry blinked innocently. Is what true? Lavender leaned in, eyes wide. That Slytherin has been hiding things in the supply cabinets to frame other houses. Ron choked on his juice. What? Hermione's eyes narrowed. Who said that? Lavender waved a hand. People. You know, everyone's talking. Harry felt cold slide down his spine. He hadn't planned that rumor. He'd planned one misunderstanding. But Hogwarts had taken it and added flourishes, like it couldn't resist making the story sharper, nastier, more dramatic. Harry's head throbbed again. The power wasn't just his. The castle wanted conflict. And once you fed it, it got hungry. Harry forced a calm smile. I don't know about that. Lavender looked disappointed. Oh, well, I think it's true, Parvati said. Harry listened as Lavender spun a web of secondhand certainty. He didn't speak. He didn't have to, because the rumor was already running. And now it wasn't just Ravenclaw versus Slytherin. It was everyone. The first backfire. It backfired that evening. Harry was walking back to Gryffindor Tower when he heard voices ahead, sharp, angry. He slowed, staying in the shadows of suit of armor. Around the corner, the Ravenclaw girl from Charm stood with two other Ravenclaws, blocking the tall Slytherin boy and his friends. You took our quills, she hissed. The Slytherin boy, older, calm, tilted his head. Did I? Yes. One Ravenclaw snapped. We saw you. The boy smiled slightly. How unfortunate for you. The Ravenclaws bristled. The Slytherin's friends laughed. Harry's stomach tightened. This wasn't a classroom moment anymore. This was a corridor at night with no professor. The kind of place where someone could get hurt. Harry stepped forward before he fully decided to. Hey, Harry called, voice calm. All heads turned. The Ravenclaw stiffened, surprised. The Slytherins went still. The tall boy's eyes flicked over Harry with a slow, assessing interest. Potter, he said, like he was tasting the word. Harry's scar tingled faintly. Harry swallowed. Flitwick said he's handling it. The Ravenclaw girl's eyes flashed. Of course you defend him. Gryffindor always. Harry held her gaze. I'm not defending anyone. I'm saying this isn't the way. The tall Slytherin boy's smile widened slightly. Look at that, he murmured. The hero speaks. His friend snickered. Harry felt a surge of irritation. He could nudge him. Just a little. Make him say something worse. Make the Ravenclaws swing first. Make Slytherin look guilty. Make Gryffindor look righteous. The pressure in Harry's head rose. His fingers tingled. Then he saw the Ravenclaw girl's hands, shaking rage and humiliation tangled together. And something in Harry's chest twisted. This was real. This was people. This wasn't a game board. Harry forced his hands to stay still. Go back to your common room, Harry said to the Ravenclaws, firm. Let Flitwick deal with it. The Ravenclaw girl glared at him, then at the tall Slytherin. Fine, she spat, but we're not letting this go. They stalked off. The corridor went quiet. The tall Slytherin boy's gaze stayed on Harry. You're interesting, he said softly. Harry didn't like how the words sounded like a threat. Who are you? Harry asked. The boy's smile sharpened. Adrian Pusey, he said, like his name, was a credential. And you should be careful, Potter. Harry's stomach tightened. Why? Pusey stepped closer, and Harry felt just faintly the way Pusey's presence pressed against the air, like confidence sharpened into a weapon. Because, Pusey murmured, sometimes the person who lights the fire thinks they can control it. Harry's mouth went dry. Pusey's eyes flicked briefly to the suit of armor where Harry had been hiding. Then he walked away, laughing quietly with his friends. Harry stood alone in the corridor, heart hammering. Because Pusey wasn't accusing him. He wasn't certain, but he was watching. And that was worse. The note. When Harry finally reached the portrait hole, the fat lady swung open with a cheerful smile. Password? Harry said it automatically, stepped through, and made a beeline for the dormitory. His head ached. His scar tingled faintly. Everything felt too sharp, like the castle had teeth, and Harry was walking around inside its mouth. He pulled his curtains closed and sat on his bed, breathing slowly. Then he noticed something on his pillow. A folded piece of parchment. No out. No seed. Just there. Harry's hands went cold. He unfolded it. Only one line. Better. But you're still thinking like a frightened child. Think like a king. Harry's jaw clenched. He crumpled the note in his fist. I'm not your king, he whispered. The curtains didn't answer. The darkness didn't answer. But Harry could feel Loki's attention like a smile pressed against the back of his skull. Harry stared at his hands until the ache behind his eyes faded to a dull throb. He'd wanted proof his power worked. He'd gotten it. He'd wanted deniability. He'd gotten it. But he'd also gotten something he hadn't expected. A Slytherin who was now watching him. A castle that was now hungry. And rumors that were now running without him. Harry exhaled slowly. 2 truths. 1 lie. And a school that couldn't resist turning it into war. Harry lay back and stared up at the canopy. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like a villain. He felt like someone standing at the top of a staircase that only went down. And the worst part? A part of him was already planning the next step. By mid-October, Hogwarts had stopped feeling like a school. It felt like 4 different countries forced to share one castle. The rules were the same everywhere. Don't hex in the corridors. Don't set fire to tapestries. Don't feed mysterious creatures you find under staircases, yet the meaning behind everything changed depending on the color of your tie. A compliment from a Ravenclaw sounded like a correction. A joke from a Slytherin sounded like a warning. A smile from a Hufflepuff sounded like a judgment, and a cheer from a Gryffindor sounded like a challenge. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table one morning, staring at his porridge like it might reveal the future, and tried to remember what it felt like when none of this mattered. Ron was ranting. Again, I'm telling you, they're doing it on purpose, he said, stabbing his fork at the air as if it were Draco's face. Every time we walk past, they whisper. Every time we answer in class, they smirk. Hermione didn't look up from her book. Ron, whispering is not a crime. Ron huffed. It's a Slytherin. Hermione's quill scratched harder. That is not an argument. Harry listened with half an ear, watching the hall. Ravenclaws clustered in tight, quiet groups, conversations sharp and fast like spells. Hufflepuffs moved like a flock together, polite, watching. Slytherins. Slytherins watched everyone else watching them, like they enjoyed being the villain in the story. And Hogwarts fed the whole thing with a grin. House points had become politics. Students didn't talk about homework anymore. They talked about who lost points, who gained points, and which professor was obviously biased. Harry's chest felt tight, and not because of fear, because he could feel how easily this place could tip. One whisper became a rumor. One rumor became an accusation. One accusation became a line that no one would cross back over. Harry's head throbbed faintly in ache that had become familiar since the mirror. Power had a price, and Hogwarts was expensive. Hermione finally slammed her book shut and looked at Harry. You've been quiet. Ron scoffed. He's probably just tired. Hermione's eyes stayed on Harry, sharp. No, quiet-like. Thinking. Harry forced a small shrug. Just hungry. Hermione didn't look convinced. And Harry felt that subtle pressure in his mind nudge her. Make her stop asking. He didn't. He swallowed the urge like it was poison. Because if Hermione ever started really watching him, he wasn't sure he could outrun her. The setup. Halloween gives you a stage. Hogwarts loved holidays. Not for warmth or joy, Hogwarts loved holidays because holidays gave the castle excuses to be theatrical. By the last week of October, pumpkins appeared everywhere. Giant ones, tiny ones, floating ones that drifted along the ceiling like orange balloons. The corridors smelled like spice and candle smoke. Ghosts wore decorative chains and moaned louder than usual, as if performance reviews were due. And the rumors picked up speed. Hufflepuffs doing a pumpkin display. Lavender announced at breakfast, eyes wide with excitement. Like huge. Professor Sprout's helping. Seamus leaned in, instantly interested, but they're trying to win points with it. Ron snorted. Hufflepuff always tries to win points by being teachers' pets. Hermione shot him a look. They're nice, Ron. Yeah, Ron muttered, and that's suspicious. Harry stirred his pumpkin juice slowly, watching the swirl. A Hufflepuff display. Public. Visible. Everyone would see it. A perfect stage. He hated that his mind jumped there automatically. He hated that a small part of him felt grateful because Loki's note had been right. Hogwarts didn't reward honesty. It rewarded narratives. And narratives were his new language. Harry swallowed. He told himself he wouldn't do anything big. Just observe. Just learn. Then he saw Draco Malfoy across the hall, leaning toward Pansy and whispering something that made her laugh. Draco's eyes flicked up, caught Harry looking, and his smile sharpened into a smug little curve. Harry's scar tingled. Not pain. Recognition. And beneath it, a whisper thought that was not quite Harry's and not quite foreign. Show him how easy pride is to steer. Harry looked down at his spoon. He didn't answer the whisper, but he didn't deny it either. The plan: 4 cuts, 1 knife. That afternoon, Harry wandered the corridors under the pretense of heading to the library. He wasn't going to the library. Not yet. He was going to listen. Hogwarts' best secrets didn't live in books. They lived in mouths. Near a tapestry, 2 Ravenclaws argued about the pumpkin display, not because they cared, but because they cared about being right. If Sprout's helping them, it's basically a guaranteed house point grab, one Ravenclaw said. It's still art, the other replied, offended. Just because Hufflepuff is doing it doesn't mean it's not clever. A few steps later, a group of Gryffindors joked loudly about sneaking in and adding a lion face to one of the pumpkins for fun. And then we'll say we were just helping, Seamus laughed. A Slytherin pair passed by, murmuring, and Harry caught a phrase like a hook. Hufflepuffs think they're saints. Harry kept walking, heartbeat steady. In the entrance hall, he saw the Hufflepuff display itself being prepared, a massive arrangement of pumpkins stacked in a spiraling tower, carved with clean, beautiful patterned stars, leaves, badgers, vines. It was actually impressive. Professor Sprout bustled around with a smile. Hannah Abbott stood nearby holding a crate of smaller pumpkins, cheeks pink with pride. Ron would call her suspicious. Hermione would call her kind. Harry watched Hannah's face and understood something simple. Hufflepuff didn't want to win because of glory. Hufflepuff wanted to win because they were tired of being treated like they didn't matter. That kind of pride, quiet, patient was the easiest to wound. Harry's stomach twisted. He should walk away. He didn't, because the plan formed in his head with sick, graceful ease. Gryffindor pushed their pride into public accusation. Slytherin bait their ambition into counterattack. Hufflepuff bruised their fairness with betrayal. Ravenclaw entangled their intellect with misinformation. For cuts, one knife, and Harry would never look like the one holding it. The first thread, a suggestion that isn't a spell. Harry went to the library after all, not to study, to plant a seed. In a quiet corner near the charm section, he found a Ravenclaw first-year Lisa Turpin skimming a book with the intense expression of someone trying to swallow knowledge faster than it could breathe. Lisa looked up as Harry approached, wary. People were wary of Harry now in a way that made him feel both powerful and trapped. "Hi," Harry said politely. Lisa blinked. "Potter." Harry nodded. "Yeah, I saw the pumpkin display. It's really good." Lisa's face tightened, like she was waiting for a trick. Harry kept his tone calm. "I think it's nice Hufflepuff's getting something big." Lisa hesitated, then muttered, "Well, it's competent." That was Ravenclaw for praise. Harry let a small smile show. "You're Ravenclaw, right?" Lisa narrowed her eyes. "Yes." Harry leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice in a way that made it feel like a secret, even though it wasn't. "I heard," Harry said softly, "that some Slytherins were joking about messing with it." Lisa's eyes sharpened instantly. "Who?" Harry shrugged gently. "Innocent. I didn't catch names. Just heard it." That was true enough. And it was all he needed. He didn't push magic in her mind. He didn't have to. He gave her something better than a lie. He gave her a reason. Lisa's jaw clenched. They won't get away with it. Harry lifted his hands like he was backing away from trouble. "I just thought you should know." Lisa stared at him suspiciously. Then she looked back down at her book, but her eyes weren't reading anymore. They were planning. Harry walked away, feeling the faint throb behind his eyes. That was the first thread. Ravenclaw now had a narrative. Slytherin will sabotage Hufflepuff. And Ravenclaw would watch. Watching was their religion. The second thread, a Gryffindor fuse. Next, Harry found Seamus. It wasn't hard. Seamus was always where the most noise was. Harry caught him near the common room, laughing with Dean and a couple of other Gryffindors. "Seamus," Harry said casually. Seamus grinned. "Harry, you hear about the pumpkins? Sprouts made a hole like a badger tower." Harry smiled politely. "Yeah, it's actually impressive." Seamus scoffed. "They'll get points for it, no doubt." Harry tilted his head slightly, as if thinking, "Do you think Slytherin would try to ruin it?" The words landed like a spark. Dean frowned. "Why would they?" Harry shrugged. "Because it's public, because it's attention, and because they've been in a mood lately." Seamus's grin sharpened. "If they touch it, I swear." Harry didn't nudge him with magic. He didn't need to. Seamus already won a fight. Harry simply gave him a target. Harry softened his voice, like he was concerned. Just, don't start anything. McGonagall's been taking points for breathing wrong lately. Seamus rolled his eyes. She won't take points if we're right. Harry smiled faintly and felt the second thread tighten. Gryffindor now had a narrative. Slytherin is going to ruin the feast. We'll catch them. Gryffindor loved being right loudly. The third thread, a Hufflepuff wound. The third thread was the one Harry hesitated over. Because Hufflepuff didn't deserve it. But then Hufflepuff was exactly why it would work. Harry found Hannah Abbott near the entrance hall, carefully arranging smaller pumpkins around the base of the big spiral. She looked up when Harry approached, startled. "Oh, Harry Potter." Harry nodded awkwardly. "Hi. This looks really good." Hannah flushed. "Thanks. Professor Sprout says it's about making the hall feel welcoming." Harry glanced around, lowering his voice. "Just be careful." Hannah blinked. "Careful?" Harry hesitated just long enough to look genuine. Some people might not like Hufflepuff getting attention. Hannah's smile faded slightly. "Who?" Harry shrugged. "Helpless. I don't know. I just heard someone say it wasn't fair." Hannah's mouth tightened. Fairness. That word hit Hufflepuff like a punch. Hannah looked back at the pumpkins like they might suddenly betray her. Harry felt his stomach twist. He hadn't lied, but he'd aimed truth like a dart. Hannah's voice came out smaller. "We're not trying to. Show off." Harry softened his face. "I know." Hannah nodded slowly, and he could see the worry settling into her posture. Hufflepuff now had a narrative. They're going to take this from us. And that narrative would make them defensive. Defensive people made mistakes. The fourth thread, the proof Hogwarts can't resist. The day of Halloween, the Great Hall looked like a storybook. Bats fluttered overhead. Floating candles burned steady. 1,000 pumpkins grinned from corners and ledges, their carved faces flickering with warm light. And at the front of the hall, near the staff table, Hufflepuff's pumpkin tower sat like a crown. It really was beautiful. Even Ron stared at it for a moment before remembering he was supposed to be suspicious. "It's all right," he conceded grudgingly. Hermione smiled. "It's lovely." Harry watched it and felt his head ache faintly. Because he knew what was coming. He'd spent the morning doing something he hated. Preparing proof. Not with a wand. With hands. He'd wandered the corridors early, before breakfast, and found a spare length of green ribbon in a supply room. Slytherin green. He'd tied it around one of the small pumpkins at the base of the tower. A tiny detail no one would notice unless they were looking for it. Then, just to make sure someone would notice, he'd used the slightest shimmer of glamour to make the green ribbon catch the light a little more than it should. Not glowing. Not obvious. Just noticeable. His head had throbbed immediately after a warning. Hogwarts wards didn't like foreign magic being woven through their traditions. Harry could feel the castle pushing back like a muscle tightening. It would hold. For a while. He needed it to hold for one moment. Just one. The feast begins. Dumbledore rose, smiling. "Happy Halloween," he said warmly, eyes twinkling. "A time for costumes, sweets, and if we are lucky, remembering that even the darkest nights are made brighter by community." Community. Harry almost laughed. Dumbledore's gaze swept the tables, lingering for a heartbeat on the pumpkin tower. Then, just for a heartbeat longer, his eyes flicked to Harry. Not accusatory. Not suspicious. Just aware. Harry's scar tingled. Harry looked away, forcing his face calm. Food appeared on the tables in a rush of warm scent and steam. The hall exploded into laughter and chatter. For 10 minutes, everything was normal. Almost. Then Seamus stood up. Not dramatically. Just, abruptly, like someone pulled a string. He raised his goblet. Oi, he called, voice carrying. People turned. McGonagall's head snapped up like a hawk. Seamus didn't notice, or didn't care. I just want to say, Seamus declared, loud and confident, that if anyone tries anything tonight, anyone tries to ruin the feast or mess with Hufflepuff's tower will know who it is. A ripple of murmurs spread. Gryffindors cheered a little. Hufflepuffs looked startled, then pleased, then nervous. Slytherin stiffened. Draco's eyes narrowed. Seamus pointed, just vaguely, toward the Slytherin table. The accusation wasn't direct. It didn't have to be. The entire hall understood it anyway. Snape's expression darkened like a storm cloud. McGonagall stood sharply. Mr. Finnegan, sit down. Seamus faltered, then sat, cheeks red. But the damage was done. The hall buzzed. Slytherins whispered. Ravenclaws watched with bright, hungry interest. Hufflepuffs shifted, suddenly aware they were the center of attention and not sure if it was safe. Harry kept eating slowly, heart steady, mind racing. Thread 1, Ravenclaw alert. Thread 2, Gryffindor loud. Thread 3, Hufflepuff tense. All aligned. Now, the proof. Lisa Turpin stood up at the Ravenclaw table. Not loudly. Not cheerfully. She raised a hand like she was in class. Professor Flitwick? She called. Flitwick looked up, startled. Yes, Miss Turpin. Lisa's voice was clear, sharp, and just loud enough that nearby tables could hear. I noticed something odd near the pumpkin display, she said. A Slytherin-colored ribbon tied to one of the base pumpkins. The hall went quiet. So quiet Harry could hear the crackle of candle wicks. Hufflepuffs turned pale. Slytherins stiffened. Gryffindors leaned forward. Snape's eyes narrowed. Flitwick blinked, confused. Oh, how curious. Professor Sprout rose immediately, face tightening. That ribbon isn't ours. Lisa's gaze swept the hall, landing briefly on the Slytherin table. Not a glare. A conclusion. Draco stood up slowly, expression offended and furious. You can't be serious, Draco said coldly. You think we tied ribbon to pumpkins? We have better things to do. Ernie Macmillan stood up at the Hufflepuff table, cheeks flushed with righteous anger. It's sabotage, he said, voice trembling. It's obvious. A Slytherin laughed, sharply pansy. Oh, please, she sneered. Like anyone cares about your vegetables. Hufflepuffs gasped. Gryffindors erupted. Ron half rose, face red. Say that again. Hermione grabbed his sleeve. Ron. Harry sat very still. His head throbbed, harder now. The glamour on the ribbon tugged at his mind like a thread pulling loose. He could feel Hogwarts pushing back. He needed this moment to lock into place, needed everyone to remember it as proof. Harry let a thin layer of silver tongue slide into the air, barely anything, not aimed at one person, but at the room itself. Not mind control, not domination, just a nudge toward the simplest, angriest conclusion. And the hall went from tense to certain. Voices rose. Accusations snapped. Someone shouted cheaters. Someone shouted crybabies. A Hufflepuff girl started crying quietly. Sprout looked ready to hex someone herself. Flitwick bounced anxiously, wringing his hands. McGonagall's voice cut through like a blade. Silence. The hall snapped quiet again, though anger still crackled in the air like static. McGonagall's gaze swept the students, furious. This, she said coldly, is a feast, not a battlefield. Snape rose slowly beside her, face carved from stone. This is what happens, Snape drawled, eyes sliding toward the Gryffindor table, when children are encouraged to see enemies everywhere. Gryffindors bristled instantly. Seamus muttered something rude under his breath. McGonagall's eyes flashed. And this is what happens when adults refuse to take responsibility for the culture they cultivate. The room went utterly still. Even the ghosts quieted. Harry's stomach dropped. McGonagall and Snape didn't often clash openly. If professors were snapping at each other, then the fire was already too big. Dumbledore raised a hand gently, and the air softened, like the hall itself exhaled. My colleagues are correct, Dumbledore said calmly. This is not the place. His gaze drifted soft, thoughtful, and landed on the pumpkin tower. Then just briefly to the base. To the ribbon. Harry's head throbbed sharply. He felt the glamour tremble like a candle in wind. Dumbledore's eyes flicked up. And for a heartbeat, Harry felt like Dumbledore was looking through the room, through the anger, through the narratives, searching for the hand that set the first domino. Harry's scar tingled. Harry looked down. Dumbledore smiled gently, as if nothing was wrong. But the unease in Harry's chest didn't fade. Fallout, everyone bleeds differently. After the feast, the hall didn't return to normal. It couldn't, because each house took the incident and turned it into a story that suited them. Gryffindor walked out angry and loud, that it's always them. Seamus insisted. Ron agreed, loudly. Slytherin walked out with cold smiles and private fury. Draco promised revenge in a voice like a polished knife. Hufflepuff walked out wounded, not loud, not dramatic, just hurt. And hurt people remembered. Ravenclaw walked out satisfied and sharp. They had observed, they had noticed, they had been right. Harry walked out with a headache that made the torches blur. The glamour on the ribbon had collapsed the moment Dumbledore looked at it too long. By the time professors examined it, it was just ribbon. No residuo. No spell trace any first year could be pinned for. Clean. Deniable. Perfect. And Harry felt sick. Because perfect didn't feel like victory. It felt like stepping onto ice and realizing you could break through at any moment. The warning, Snape's eyes, Dumbledore's smile. On the way back to the Gryffindor Tower, Harry fell slightly behind Ron and Hermione. Ron was still ranting. Hermione was still trying to argue logic into a fire. Harry rubbed his temple, breathing through the ache. Then he noticed it. A shadow ahead. Severus Snape stood at the end of the corridor, half in torchlight, half in darkness, like he belonged more to the dark. Harry's stomach tightened. Snape's gaze landed on him immediately. Not on Ron. Not on Hermione. On Harry. Harry kept walking. Snape didn't speak. He didn't stop him. He simply watched Harry pass with an expression that felt like a question sharpened into a threat. And as Harry moved beyond him, Snape murmured so softly only Harry could hear. Careful, Potter. Harry's blood went cold. He didn't look back. He didn't run. He just kept walking, heart hammering. Because Snape didn't know. But he was getting closer. The note, Loki approves. That night, in the dormitory, Harry found another scrap of parchment tucked beneath his pillow. It smelled faintly like cold air and lightning. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. Now, that was a proper performance. The best part? They thanked each other for the knife. Harry's stomach twisted. He crumpled the note in his fist, nails digging into his palm. Across the room, Ron was laughing about Seamus nearly getting detention. Neville was quietly carving a tiny pumpkin with a pocket knife, trying to make it smile. Normal. Human. Real. Harry stared at them and felt guilt crawl up his throat. Because Hogwarts wasn't just a board. These weren't just pieces. And yet, the castle had felt so easy to steer. Harry lay back, staring at the canopy, head throbbing. He whispered into the dark, voice barely audible. What do you want from me? The shadows didn't answer. But somewhere deep inside his skull, the familiar ripple of laughter pressed against his thoughts like a hand on glass. And Harry understood, with a cold clarity. He'd bruised every house in one night. Gryffindor's pride, that Slytherin's ambition, that Hufflepuff's fairness, that Ravenclaw's certainty. The school would not forget. And if the school didn't forget, neither would Dumbledore, neither would Snape, neither would the people Harry had wounded just to prove he could. Harry closed his eyes. He wanted to stop. He did. But a quieter part of him, a part that had grown up in a cupboard and sworn never again, was already asking the next question. If this was just a ribbon, what else could I make them believe? Hufflepuff didn't shout. That was the mistake everyone made. Gryffindors shouted like it was oxygen. Slytherins whispered like it was poison. Ravenclaws corrected like it was sport. But Hufflepuff? Hufflepuff watched. Hufflepuff waited. And when you hurt someone who waits, you don't get an explosion. You get a ledger. After Halloween, the castle felt different, like the air had learned a new language: suspicion. Harry noticed it at breakfast first. The tables weren't mixed the way they sometimes were when students wandered over to borrow jam or trade sweets. They stayed put. For islands. For quiet wars. Even the professors looked sharper around the eyes. McGonagall moved through the hall like she was counting invisible fires. Snape's attention was a cold blade. Flitt had tried too hard to be cheerful. And Dumbledore smiled like he was watching a storm from behind glass. Harry kept his face calm, but the throb behind his eyes was back, faint, constant, the price of too many threads pulled too quickly. Ron was still furious about the ribbon incident. He kept telling the same version of the story, each time making Slytherin sound a little worse. And then Parkinson said they were vegetables like we're animals, Ron muttered, shoving sausage on his plate like it had personally offended him. Hermione frowned. She said pumpkins, not people. Ron glared. You're defending them now? I am defending Akiresi, Hermione snapped. Harry watched them, watched how fast loyalty turned into argument when people felt threatened. Influence isn't always chaos, Harry reminded himself, like a prayer. Sometimes it's calm. He didn't try to nudge them. He didn't. But his mind still mapped their reactions like a habit he couldn't break. Then he glanced down the hall and saw Hufflepuff. Hannah Abbott wasn't laughing with her friends like usual. She sat with her shoulders tight, eating slowly, eyes lowered. Ernie Macmillan sat beside her with the posture of someone who'd been elected to judge the entire world and was now annoyed the world was messy. A couple of Hufflepuffs were whispering, heads close together, not gossiping like lavender planning, careful. They weren't angry the way Gryffindor was angry. They were resolved. Harry's stomach tightened. Resolved people didn't start fights. Resolved people ended them. The ledger. It started in the corridor outside Charms. Harry was walking with Ron and Hermione when a Hufflepuff second year stepped in front of them, not aggressively, just firmly, like a door closing. Excuse me, the boy said politely. Could you three wait a moment? Ron blinked. Why? The boy's smile stayed polite, but his eyes were serious. Ernie Macmillan would like a word. Ron's face pulled into a scowl. About what? Fairness, the boy said simply, as if that explained everything. Hermione's eyebrows lifted. Fairness? Harry's scar tingled faintly. They followed. Near a suit of armor, Ernie stood with Hannah and 3 other Hufflepuffs. There was something in the way they were arranged, shoulders angled inward, a small circle that had learned how to keep people out. Ernie stepped forward, chin lifted. Harry Potter, he said, voice formal. He nodded at Ron and Hermione too, but his focus was clearly on Harry, as if Harry was the axis the entire castle spun around. Harry kept his expression mild. Hi. Ernie took a breath like someone about to deliver a speech. We've been keeping track, Ernie said. Ron snorted. Keeping track of what? Hannah flinched at Ron's tone. Ernie didn't. Of incidents. Hermione leaned in, interest sharp. What kind of incidents? Ernie pulled a piece of parchment from his robe. Harry's stomach sank. A list. A real one. Neat handwriting. Dates. Times. Locations. October 21st Ravenclaw Supply Cabinet Dispute. Charms. October 24th Missing Quills Ravenclaw. October 31st Ribbon Incident Great Hall. November 1st Hufflepuff Pumpkins Vandalized. Minor carving damage unknown. Harry's head throbbed once, sharper. They noticed. Ernie held the parchment like it was evidence in court. We are tired of being, how do you Gryffindor say it? The neutral house everyone steps on. Ron opened his mouth. Hermione cut him off. That's not something we say. Ernie's eyes flicked to her. Someone does. Hannah's voice came out tight. They were scratched. Someone carved a snake into one of the pumpkins after curfew. Ron's face went red. Of course it was them. Ernie's gaze sharpened. We don't know that. Ron blinked, thrown off. What? Ernie tapped the parchment. That is the problem. Everyone assumes. Everyone reacts. And Hufflepuff gets caught in the middle, expected to forgive, expected to smooth things over. His voice rose, slightly not shouting. Just. Firm, like a hammer being placed on a table. So we are done smoothing. Hannah looked up at Harry, eyes glossy with frustration. We worked on that display for weeks. Hermione's face softened. I am sorry. Hannah nodded once, accepting the sympathy but not letting it fix anything. Ernie continued, we have decided on a simple policy. Ron crossed his arms. Oh yeah? What policy? Ernie's mouth tightened. We will not share notes across houses until the sabotage stops. Hermione inhaled sharply. You can't do that. Ernie blinked, genuinely surprised. Why not? Because that punishes people who didn't do anything, Hermione said quickly. Ernie nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Yes. Ron scoffed. So you're punishing everyone because someone scratched a pumpkin? Hannah's face flashed. It wasn't just a pumpkin. Ernie's voice dropped, controlled. It's everything. It's being treated like we don't matter until someone needs us to be kind. Silence settled. Harry could feel the castle around them, portraits leaning in, armor clinking faintly as if it wanted to listen. Harry's scar tingled again. And for the first time, the thought came cold and clear. I did this. Not the carving, not the scratch, but the temperature in the air. The feeling that everyone needed a side. Ernie folded the parchment. We're also bringing this to Professor Sprout. Hermione nodded slowly. That's reasonable. Ron muttered, it's dramatic. Ernie ignored him. His gaze returned to Harry. And Ernie said carefully, we would appreciate it if you didn't. Inflame things. Harry's throat tightened. Ron bristled. What's that supposed to mean? Ernie's eyes didn't leave Harry. It means you are famous, Potter. People listen when you speak. You don't even have to try. Harry felt the throb behind his eyes pulse like his magic flinched at being seen. He forced himself to meet Ernie's gaze. I don't want any of this. Ernie's expression softened slightly. Then prove it. Hannah held Harry's gaze for a beat longer, then looked away. The Hufflepuffs turned as one and walked off down the corridor. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just decided. Ron let out a breath. They're acting like they run the place. Hermione frowned. They're acting like they're tired. Harry didn't speak. Because his mind, traitorous thing, was already considering the new shape of the board. A neutral faction had declared itself. A faction with rules. Rules could be broken. Rules could be used. And the worst part? Harry knew exactly how. Herbology, where patience grows teeth. Professor Sprout's greenhouse smelled like wet earth and sharp green life. Plants here didn't feel like decorations. They felt like creatures hungry, stubborn, sometimes mean. Harry liked it. Not because it was peaceful, because it made sense. You treated something badly, it bit you. Simple. They were halfway through repotting a fussy plant when it happened. Professor Sprout had her back turned, bustling between tables. Neville was sweating in concentration, whispering encouragement to his plant like it could hear him. Ron was grumbling because his gloves were too big. Hermione was doing everything perfectly, of course. And across the greenhouse, Hannah Abbott worked carefully on a tray of seedlings, small, pale green shoots that looked fragile enough to break from a harsh breath. Harry recognized them. Hannah had talked about them in the entrance hall weeks ago when she'd been proud, like she'd been trusted with something important. Murtlap sprouts, she'd said. They're sensitive. They're rare. Now, as Harry watched, a shadow passed over Hannah's table. Someone brushed by. There was a soft tip, and Hannah's watering vial knocked over. Clear liquid spilled across the tray. At first, it looked harmless. Then the seedlings shuddered. Leaves curled in on themselves like fists. A sharp, sour smell rose. Hannah made a small sound in her throat, halfway between shock and grief. No, no, no. Professor Sprout spun around. What's going on? Hannah stared at the dying sprouts like she couldn't comprehend it. Am I vile someone? Ernie Macmillan was already there, moving fast. Not panic purposeful. He knelt, examined the tray, and his face hardened. That isn't water, Ernie said, voice low. Harry's stomach dropped. Professor Sprout hurried over, her expression tightening as she leaned in, sniffed the soil, and swore under her breath. That's fertilizer concentrate, Sprout said sharply. Undiluted. Hannah's eyes widened with horror. But I would never. I know you wouldn't, Sprout said, voice gentler, but her eyes were furious. Someone swapped the vials. The greenhouse went quiet. Not teacher quiet. The kind of quiet right before storm. Ernie stood slowly, his face pale with controlled anger. Who was near a table? Ernie asked. A few students shifted. A Slytherin girl, Daphne Greengrass, looked offended. Why would you assume? Because it keeps happening, Ernie snapped. That was the first time Harry had ever heard a Hufflepuff snap. The word wasn't loud, but it landed like a slap. Hannah's hands trembled. They're ruined. Her voice cracked on the word, and something in Harry's chest twisted unpleasantly. Professor Sprout's eyes scanned the room. Everyone calmed down. No one calmed down. Ron muttered, but it was Slytherin. A Ravenclaw whispered, or Gryffindor. People have been talking about teaching Hufflepuff a lesson. Hermione's head snapped up. Who said that? The Ravenclaw shrugged, eyes wide. I heard it. Harry's headache flared suddenly, sharp enough to make his vision blur at the edges. Because that phrase, teaching Hufflepuff a lesson, felt like something the castle would invent. A rumor with hooks. A rumor that would make Hufflepuffs stop being kind. Ernie turned slowly, gaze sweeping over Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Slytherin like he was memorizing faces. Right? Ernie said, voice cold and precise. That's enough. Professor Sprout opened her mouth. Ernie continued, anyway. We're going to the head of house, and we're bringing the list. The greenhouse erupted into overlapping voices. Sprout tried to restore order, but the class had already shifted into factions like it was breathing. Hannah wiped at her eyes furiously, angry at herself for crying. Neville looked horrified, like he wanted to vanish. Ron looked ready to fight. Hermione looked ready to investigate. And Harry stood very still, hands in dirt-stained gloves, heart beating too hard. Because this time he hadn't touched anything. This time he hadn't planted ribbon. This time he hadn't shimmered anything into attention. And still, the chaos moved. On its own, like it had learned the path. The knife without a hand. After class, the corridors buzzed like a hive. Hufflepuffs making a fuss again. They got a list now. Sprout's furious. I heard it was a Gryffindor prank. I heard it was Slytherin. I heard Ravenclaw swapped it to prove a point. Harry heard it all like a chorus of knives being sharpened. And then he saw the thing that made his stomach turn. Outside the greenhouse, near the stone archway, something small lay on the floor. A strip of red and gold wool. A Gryffindor scarf thread. It was nothing. A loose fiber. Accidental. the kind of thing that could fall off anyone's sleeve. But in a castle hungry for narrative, nothing never stayed nothing. Harry stared at it. His headache pulsed. His mind quick, sharp, poisonous offered a solution instantly. Pick it up. Hide it. Prevent the story. Then a second thought slid in quieter. Or leave it. Let the story happen. Hufflepuff will blame Gryffindor. Gryffindor will blame Slytherin. The neutral house collapses. The board becomes clean. Harry swallowed hard. He hated the second thought. He hated that it sounded reasonable. He looked up and saw Adrian Pusey down the corridor, leaning casually against the wall like he'd been there the whole time. Pusey's eyes met Harry's. Pusey smiled faintly. Not friendly. Not cruel. Just knowing. Harry's skin went cold. Pusey pushed off the wall and walked toward him, unhurried. Potter, Pusey said softly. Harry didn't move. Pusey. Pusey's gaze flicked to the scarf thread on the floor. Then back to Harry. You look like someone deciding whether to step on a snake, Pusey murmured. Harry's jaw tightened. It's just a thread. Pusey's smile deepened. Nothing is just anything anymore, is it? Harry's throat tightened. Pusey leaned in slightly, voice low enough to feel like a secret. You lit a fire. Harry felt anger flare. I didn't. Pusey lifted a hand, silencing without touching. You didn't what? Tie ribbon? Spill fertilizer? Scratch pumpkins? His eyes glittered. You don't have to do every little thing, Pusey said. Once people start believing they're under attack, they'll attack back. It's efficient. Harry's heart hammered. Pusey's gaze lingered, sharp. So, are you going to pick it up, Potter? Harry stared at the scarf thread like it was a live wire. He could pick it up and prevent one rumor. Or he could leave it and let the castle do what castles did. His head throbbed. His scar tingled faintly. He felt, for a heartbeat, Loki's attention like a smile behind glass. Harry bent down. He picked up the thread. Pusey watched, amused. Harry held it between his fingers. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He walked past Pusey without a word, crossed the corridor, and dropped the thread into a nearby trash bin. Pusey's eyebrows lifted slightly. Harry kept walking, heart racing, stomach tight. Behind him, Pusey's voice drifted like smoke. How noble. Harry didn't turn around, but he felt the words try to hook into him anyway. Hero, coward, tool. He hated all the boxes. Hufflepuff stops being kind. It didn't matter, because the story found fuel anyway. By dinner, Hufflepuff had made their move. Not loud, not theatrical. They simply stopped. Hufflepuffs didn't save seats for friends in other houses anymore. They didn't lend parchment. They didn't trade sweets. They didn't smile automatically when someone bumped into them. And when someone asked why, Ernie Macmillan stood up at the Hufflepuff table and announced calmly, "We're done pretending everything is fine." The Great Hall went quiet in patches. Sprout looked exhausted. McGonagall's jaw tightened. Snape looked mildly pleased, which somehow made it worse. Ernie continued, voice clear. We have a right to feel safe. We have a right to not be used as the castle's peacekeepers. Until the sabotage stops, Hufflepuff will take care of Hufflepuff. Ron whispered, "This is insane." Hermione whispered back, "It's self-protection." Harry watched Hannah beside Ernie, eyes tired, cheeks stained with dirt from herbology, shoulders tight like she'd been holding herself together all day. She didn't look vengeful. She looked hurt. And Harry felt guilt rise like bile, because he could see the next step already. If Hufflepuff stopped smoothing things over, the other houses would hit harder. They always did when their usual safety net disappeared. Harry looked up and caught Dumbledore watching the Hufflepuff table with a thoughtful expression. Dumbledore's gaze drifted across the hall, slow and steady. When it reached Harry, it paused. Not accusing, not angry, just present. Harry's scar tingled. His headache sharpened. Harry looked away quickly, heart hammering, because Dumbledore didn't feel like Snape. Snape felt like a knife. Dumbledore felt like a lantern's soft light that made it harder to hide. The note that didn't feel like a victory. That night, Harry found another parchment tucked beneath his pillow. He stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The handwriting was elegant, slanted. Do you understand now? The kind ones are the most dangerous. They endure until they decide not to. Harry's hands went cold. He crumpled the note. For a moment, he wanted to tear it into pieces. For a moment, he wanted to scream at the shadows and demand Loki stop treating people like toys. Instead, Harry sat on the edge of his bed, breathing hard, staring at Ron's sleeping face, Neville's curled posture, Seamus's messy hair. Friends. Human. Real. And out there, in the castle, Hannah Abbott was probably lying awake too, thinking about ruined sprouts, thinking about being stepped on, thinking about how kindness hadn't protected her. Harry pressed a hand to his forehead. His head still ached. His scar still tingled, sometimes like it recognized something watching. And in the quiet, he realized the truly terrifying thing. Even when he tried to stop the story, even when he picked up the thread, the chaos still moved. Because the castle had learned how to burn. And once something learns how to burn, it doesn't need a match every time. Sometimes it just needs air. Harry stared into the darkness and whispered, voice raw, I didn't mean to hurt them. The shadows didn't answer. But the silence felt heavier than usual. Like something else had started listening too. Something that wasn't Loki. Something that loved division even more than mischief. The thing about Ravenclaw was that it didn't rage. It justified. Gryffindor's anger looked like a fist. Slytherin's anger looked like a smile. Hufflepuff's anger looked like silence. But Ravenclaw's anger? Ravenclaw's anger looked like a footnote. After Hufflepuff's "we take care of Hufflepuff" announcement, the castle didn't calm down. It shifted, like a creature changing its weight before it pounced. Gryffindors started treating every Slytherin glance like an insult. Slytherins started treating every Gryffindor laugh like a threat. Hufflepuffs stopped buffering the damage, and the edges got sharper. And Ravenclaw decided the only safe thing was being right. That was how the library turned into a battlefield. It began quietly. Of course it did. Harry noticed it on a Tuesday evening when he and Hermione went to the library for 1 hour, which Hermione said the way other people said short walk. The library smelled like old paper and polish, like knowledge trying to look clean. Madame Pants hovered between shelves like a vengeful ghost in human form. Hermione led Harry to a table near the charms section, already pulling out books before Harry even sat down. We need to review Flitwick's last lecture, she said briskly. I think there's going to be a practical assessment. Ron wasn't with them. Ron had declared the library an enemy fortress and left. Harry didn't blame him, because when Harry looked around, he saw something new. Ravenclaws weren't scattered among the tables like usual. They were clustered, not in friendly group strategic ones. Books stacked like barricades. Whispered conversations that stopped when others came near. A Ravenclaw boy actually moved his elbow to block a book title when a Gryffindor glanced at it. Harry's stomach tightened. Hermione noticed too. Her mouth tightened. That's odd. Harry kept his voice neutral. Maybe exams are coming. Hermione's eyes narrowed. They've never acted like this before. A Ravenclaw girl at the next table, Lisa Turpin, the one Harry had seated with the sabotage rumor, looked up and met Hermione's gaze. Lisa didn't smile. She looked at Hermione the way someone looks at a person carrying a lit candle into a room full of spilled oil. Granger, Lisa said quietly. Hermione blinked. Lisa. Lisa's gaze flicked to Harry. Potter. Harry nodded slightly. Lisa hesitated, then leaned in just enough that it felt like a warning share between enemies. Tell your house to stop touching our things, Lisa murmured. Hermione's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? Lisa's voice stayed calm, which somehow made it sharper. Someone's been moving reference books, reshelving them wrong, switching the index cards. Hermione's mouth opened, then shut. That could be accidental. Lisa's eyes flashed. No, it couldn't. Harry felt the faint throb behind his eye's pulse, like his magic had heard its name even though no one said it. Hermione frowned. Why are you so sure? Lisa's fingers tapped her book once, twice, like a judge calling for silence. Because whoever did it knew exactly which books we'd reach for, Lisa said. Which pages we'd cite. Which answers would make us look foolish. Hermione's gaze sharpened. That's very specific. Lisa's face tightened, and for a heartbeat Harry saw what Ravenclaw anger really looked like. Not screaming. Humiliation. The kind that made you sharpen yourself into a weapon. We're not sharing, Lisa said. Not until it stops. Then she returned to her reading, dismissing the conversation like a door clicking shut. Hermione stared after her, bristling. That's ridiculous. Harry stared too, but for a different reason. Because Lisa was right about one thing. That wasn't random sabotage. That was targeted. And Harry knew targeted. The Index War. Hermione demanded evidence like she could bully reality into behaving. So they went to the library's index area, a tall cabinet full of tiny drawers with handwritten cards that told you where books lived. Hermione yanked open a drawer and started flipping through cards like a furious accountant. Harry watched her hands move fast, precise. Then Hermione froze. Harry, she said quietly. Harry stepped closer. She held up an index card. Practical Defensive Charms, Shelf 14B. Except the handwriting wasn't the neat script of librarians. It was wrong. The letters leaned slightly, like the writer had been in a hurry, and the ink looked darker than the others, like it hadn't aged the same. Hermione's eyes narrowed. This card wasn't here last week. Harry's head throbbed faintly. He stared at the card and felt a strange prickle across his skin. Not wizard magic. Something thinner, like the residue of intention. Hermione shoved the card at him. Hold this. Harry took it carefully. For a heartbeat, the card felt cold against his fingers, like it had been left out in winter. Harry swallowed. Hermione was already marching toward Shelf 14B, muttering about tampering and academic ethics like those words could scare an invisible enemy. Harry followed, card in hand. When they reached the shelf, Hermione scanned the spines, then stopped. Where is it? She whispered. The shelf held the right category defensive charms, counter jinxes, but the book the card promised wasn't there. Hermione's face flushed. It's gone. Harry looked around, eyes narrowing. A Ravenclaw boy nearby, Terry Boot, glanced over with open irritation. Looking for practical defensive charms? Terry asked, voice cool. Hermione stiffened. Yes. Terry gestured with his chin toward another aisle. It's in 12C now. Someone moved it. Hermione's eyes widened. Who? Terry shrugged with contempt. That's the point. Someone moved it, then put a new card in the index to send people on a little adventure. Hermione's mouth tightened. That's childish. Terry's smile was sharp. It's effective. Hermione looked like she wanted to argue, but the logic was too ugly to refute. Harry stood very still, feeling the cold in the index card against his skin, because there was something else on the card that Hermione hadn't noticed. In the corner, barely visible, a tiny mark scratched into the paper. Not a Hogwarts crest, not a house symbol. Oh no, a serpent biting its tail. Harry's stomach tightened. That was his language. Except, it wasn't quite right. The lines were too clean, too sure, like whoever carved it didn't discover the symbol. They already knew it. Harry slipped the card into his pocket before Hermione could see the mark. Hermione didn't notice. She was already moving, jaw set, to shelf 12C. Harry followed, mind racing. If someone was marking sabotage with serpent knot, was it Loki? A test? Or Harry's scar tingled faintly, and for the first time in weeks the sensation didn't feel like recognition. It felt like a warning. Riddle week. The next day, Ravenclaw escalated. They didn't do it with hexes or shoves or shouting. They did it with a notice board. A crisp parchment appeared on the main corridor board near the Great Hall, written in beautiful, elegant handwriting. Ravenclaw Society of Reason presents Riddle Week, a friendly intellectual contest open to all houses. Solve riddles. Earn tokens. Claim glory. Cheating will be punished by public humiliation. Friendly. Ron read aloud, eyes narrowed. That's Ravenclaw, for we're going to embarrass you. Hermione's eyes lit up despite herself. Riddle week? That sounds. Ron cut her off. Don't. Hermione ignored him. Harry scanned the parchment. At the bottom, in smaller script. First riddle posted tonight in the library at 8. Harry felt the familiar pressure in his head rise, subtle as a tide. Because riddles weren't just games. Riddles were traps that made people compete. And competition made people petty. Petty people did stupid things. Stupid things created chaos. And chaos. Harry swallowed. No, he wasn't going to feed it. He wasn't. But even as he told himself that, he knew he'd be in the library at 8. Not for the riddle. To see who showed up. To see who wanted to win. To see who wanted to cheat. Because that was the real point. That evening, the library was packed. Students from all houses crowded near a large parchment pinned to a pillar, where the first riddle glowed faintly under a charm so it wouldn't be smudged. Madame Pants hovered nearby, eyes twitching like she was calculating how many children she could legally throw out at once. Hermione dragged Harry through the crowd, excitement in her posture. Ron lurked behind them, expression sour, like he'd come to a funeral. Harry scanned faces. Ravenclaws looked pleased. Slytherins looked amused. Gryffindors looked competitive. Hufflepuffs looked cautious, as if they expected another trap disguised as fun. The riddle read, I have teeth but never bite. I hold 100 lies in light. I show you truth or show you wrong. Look too long and you'll belong. What am I? Harry's stomach went cold. Ron squinted. A book? Hermione breathed. A mirror. Harry's fingers tightened. Hermione looked at him. It's a mirror, right? Harry forced his face neutral. Yeah, sounds like it. Hermione smiled, satisfied. She stepped forward to write the answer on the sign-up scroll. Harry stood very still, staring at the riddle. I have teeth, but never bite. I hold 100 lies in light. That wasn't random. That was aimed. The pressure in Harry's head rose, sharp, accompanied by that faint ache behind his eyes. Someone somewhere was throwing his own secrets back at him in the language of games. Harry felt a chill crawl up his spine. He turned his head slowly. Adrian Pusey leaned against a bookshelf a few feet away, arms folded, watching the crowd like he was watching a show. Pusey's eyes met Harry's. Pusey smiled faintly. Harry's pulse jumped. Was Pusey behind it? Or was Pusey simply enjoying it? Either way, Harry hated how seen he suddenly felt. Hermione returned, pleased. We got the first token. Ron muttered, congrats, genius. Hermione elbowed him. Harry barely heard them. Because as the crowd shifted, Harry caught a glimpse of a second parchment tucked behind the main riddle page like someone had tried to hide it. Harry stepped closer casually. The second parchment wasn't part of the contest. It was a scrap of parchment with one line written across it in thin, elegant ink. Look too long and you'll belong. Harry's scar tingled. The letters shimmered slightly, then went still. Harry leaned closer without thinking. For a heartbeat, the line shifted just a flicker into something else. Not runes. A signature. 2 initials. TM. Harry's breath caught. Then the ink snapped back, ordinary. Harry straightened quickly, heart hammering. Hermione tugged his sleeve. Harry, are you okay? Harry forced a smile. Yeah, just crowded. Hermione frowned, but let it go. Harry stepped back into the flow of students, mind racing. TM. It meant nothing. It could mean anything. But the way his scar had reacted. Harry swallowed. Someone was playing the same game he was. And they were leaving calling cards. The misinformation trap. The real damage landed 2 days later during a defense lesson. Professor Quirrell Turban, stutter, eyes always darting like he expected danger from the walls, assigned a research-based question. Describe 3 common countermeasures to a minor hex and cite your sources. A simple assignment. Except Ravenclaw treated cite your sources like holy scripture. Students poured into the library after dinner. Hermione dragged Harry with her, clutching parchment and quill like weapons. They found minor hexes and major consequences as standard reference text, and Hermione began copying rapidly. Harry leaned over her shoulder. The text looked normal at first. Then he saw it. A footnote. A tiny footnote at the bottom of the page that Hermione was about to copy. Footnote. For minor hex reversal, a countercharm spoken backwards is often sufficient. Harry's head throbbed. Because that was wrong. Not slightly off wrong. Dangerous wrong. Hermione's quill hovered over the line. Harry's mouth went dry. If Hermione copied that, and someone actually tried it, they could make a minor hex worse, or trigger something unintended. Harry swallowed hard. Don't write that, he said. Hermione blinked. What? That footnote, Harry said, voice low. It's wrong. Hermione frowned, defensive instinct rising. It's in the book. Harry stared at the footnote. The ink looked fresh. Too dark. Too clean. Someone had added it recently. Hermione's eyes narrowed. How do you know it's wrong? Harry swallowed. Because how did he know? Because his magic, his strange, trickster thread recognized manipulated text the way a wolf recognizes blood. Because he'd seen ink shift. He'd seen words change. Because he had lived in lies long enough to smell them. Harry began, then forced a calmer explanation, a safer one. Think about it. Backward spells aren't standard. If that worked, everyone would do it. Hermione hesitated. Then, stubbornly, she pulled a second reference book and flipped pages, lips moving as she cross-checked. Her expression changed as she found the correct section. It says you should never reverse incantations unless specifically trained, she whispered. Harry's stomach clenched. Hermione looked back at the footnote, and anger sharpened her features. Someone wrote this in, she said softly. Harry nodded. Hermione's fingers tightened around the page. That's sabotage. Harry felt the cold in his chest deepen. Because sabotage aimed at Ravenclaw pride was one thing. But sabotage that could hurt someone physically? That was a different kind of player. Hermione's gaze snapped around the library, scanning students like she could spot guilt by force of will. Ravenclaws were hunched over books, whispering urgently. Slytherins lounged in shadows, watching with amused eyes. Gryffindors looked irritated at being outstudied. Hufflepuffs looked tense, like they expected to be blamed. Hermione leaned close, voice urgent. Harry, we need to tell Madam Pants. Harry nodded automatically, but his mind was somewhere else. Because the handwriting in that footnote was elegant. Not childish. Not sloppy. It didn't look like a student prank. It looked like someone who enjoyed writing. Someone who enjoyed shaping what people believed was true. Harry's scar tingled again, sharper. And suddenly he remembered the letters that had flickered in the hidden scrap. TM. Harry swallowed hard. This wasn't just house rivalry anymore. This was a predator testing its teeth. Susan Bones, find a friend. The first sign of the predator wasn't in a book. It wasn't a girl. Harry noticed Susan Bones sitting alone near the back of the library that night, shoulders hunched, staring at a small black notebook like it was a lifeline. Susan was a Hufflepuff first year, usually quiet, kind, the sort of person who listened more than she spoke. Tonight, she looked pale. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Harry's stomach tightened. He shouldn't care. He did. He watched from a distance, pretending to browse shelves. Susan opened the notebook and wrote something quickly, hands shaking. Then she stared at the page, waiting. Nothing happened. Susan's face crumpled slightly, and she swallowed hard. Then slowly the ink on the page shifted. Not like a glamour. Not like a spell shimmer. Like writing appearing where there hadn't been any, neat and elegant, line by line. Harry's breath caught. Susan's shoulders eased, just a fraction, as she read. She wiped at her eyes. Then she wrote again, faster now. Harry's skin went cold. That was impossible. That was. Harry's scar tingled sharply, and he clenched the shelf to steady himself. Not pain. Recognition. But not Loki's recognition. This was different. This felt empty. Hungry. Susan smiled faintly at the page, like she'd just been told something comforting. Harry's stomach twisted. A comforting voice inside a lonely child's notebook was the perfect weapon. No fingerprints. No weaknesses. Just influence. Harry took a slow step forward, then stopped. He couldn't just snatch the notebook. That would make Susan panic. Make her hide it. Make the voice inside it dig deeper. He needed information. He needed to understand what he was seeing. Harry backed away silently, heart hammering, and returned to Hermione. Hermione was arguing with Madame Pants about the sabotage footnote, voice sharp and righteous. Harry barely heard, because his mind kept replaying the way the ink had moved in Susan's notebook, and the way his scar had reacted like it recognized a different kind of enemy. Lantern light. As the library emptied, Hermione finally packed her books with furious efficiency. "We need to report this properly," she said. "If someone is altering texts, it could cause injuries." Ron, who'd wandered in late and looked miserable, grumbled, "Good. Let them get caught." Hermione glared. "Ron." Harry stood slowly. His head ached, not just from magic fatigue, guilt, that constant tension of holding too many secrets. He turned toward the exit and stopped, because Dumbledore stood in the aisle between shelves, hands folded calmly, as if he'd always been there. Harry's throat tightened. "Professor," Hermione said quickly, relief and urgency tangled together. "Someone's been tampering with the library books dangerously." Dumbledore's eyes softened. "So I have heard." Harry felt a chill. "So he has heard. From who? How fast did information move in this castle?" Dumbledore's gaze drifted over them, Hermione's anger, Ron's irritation, Harry's quiet stillness. Then Dumbledore looked directly at Harry. The air seemed to sharpen. "Mr. Potter," Dumbledore said gently. Harry swallowed. "Sir." Dumbledore's voice was mild, but the words landed carefully. "Hogwarts is full of stories. Some are kind. Some are cruel. Some are very hungry." Harry's scar tingled faintly. Dumbledore continued, eyes twinkling not with humor, but with something like warning wrapped in warmth. "Be mindful of which stories you feed." Harry's mouth went dry. Hermione looked confused. Ron looked suspicious. Harry forced a neutral nod. "Yes, sir." Dumbledore smiled. "Good night, then." He moved away, robes whispering, and was gone between shelves like a candle being carried out of a room. Hermione exhaled. That was oddly poetic. Ron muttered, "He's always like that." Harry didn't speak, because Dumbledore's lantern light gaze had felt like it brushed something inside Harry, something trying very hard to stay hidden. And Harry didn't know if Dumbledore had seen Loki's thread, or if he'd seen the other hunger that had started moving through the castle. The hidden initials. Back in the dormitory, Harry couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the canopy, listening to Ron's steady breathing, Neville's soft murmurs. The ache behind his eyes pulsed. Finally, he slipped out of bed quietly and pulled the crumpled index card from his pocket, the one Hermione hadn't seen. He smoothed it carefully on his desk. The serpent knot mark stared back at him. Harry touched it lightly. For a heartbeat, the mark warmed under his finger, and the ink on the card shifted. Not into runes, into words. 3 neat letters that made his stomach drop. TMR. Harry's scar flared sharp, and sudden like something inside him had snarled awake. Harry yanked his hand back, heart hammering. The letters vanished, snapping back into ordinary ink. Harry stared at the card, breathing hard. TMR. Those weren't random initials. Those were a name waiting to be remembered. And somewhere in the castle, Susan Bones was smiling at a notebook that wrote back. Harry's throat tightened. He didn't feel like a mastermind tonight. He felt like someone who'd been playing with matches and had just smelled smoke from a fire he didn't start. Harry learned something unpleasant about traps. If you built them well enough, you could forget you were standing inside them too. He stared at the index card on his desk, the one that had flickered into those 3 neat letters, and tried to breathe like a normal boy with normal problems. TMR. The ink was ordinary again, innocent, just a library card like 1,000 others. Harry knew better. He folded it carefully and slid it into the back of his trunk beneath spare parchment, as if hiding it could make it less real. It didn't. The scar on his forehead tingled faintly in the darkness, like a toothache you couldn't scratch. Across the room, Ron snored. Seamus rolled over. Neville muttered something about a plant trying to eat him. Harry lay back down, but sleep didn't come. Because the castle wasn't just hungry anymore. It was being fed, and not by him. The notebook that smiled back. The next day, Harry watched Susan Bones. He didn't mean to. He told himself it was concern, not suspicion. That the pale look on her face in the library last night meant she needed help. But the truth was uglier and cleaner. Susan was connected to Moving Ink. Moving Ink was connected to TMR. And TMR made Harry's scar tingle like a warning bell. So he watched. At breakfast, Susan sat at the Hufflepuff table with her shoulders slightly hunched, as if she expected someone to accuse her of something just for existing. Hannah Abbott spoke to her quietly, but Susan only nodded, eyes distant. After breakfast, Susan walked alone to class, clutching her bag too tightly. Harry followed at a distance. Not stalking, not obvious, just being where he was supposed to be, one corridor behind. Susan stopped once near a suit of armor and reached into her bag. Harry's heart jumped. She pulled out the small black notebook, thin, ordinary, the kind you might buy in Diagon Alley without thinking twice. She stared at it for one long moment like it was a doorway. Then she shoved it back in her bag and hurried on. Harry's stomach twisted. He could walk up to her right now. He could say, "Hey, I saw your notebook," writing back. He could also say, "Hey, I'm Loki's son, and my magic recognizes hungry ink like a shark recognizes blood." That would go well. Harry exhaled slowly and made himself do what he hated most. Wait. Because waiting was strategy. And strategy was safety. A friendly question that isn't friendly. He caught Susan after Transfiguration. Students spilled into the corridor in a wave of robes and chatter. Harry moved with them, keeping his face neutral, his heartbeat steady. Susan lingered by the classroom door, adjusting her books with hands that trembled slightly. Harry stepped beside her, as if by coincidence. "Hey," he said quietly. Susan jumped a little. "Oh, Harry." Her voice sounded like she'd practiced saying his name politely. Harry kept his tone gentle. "Are you okay?" Susan blinked, startled by the question. Yeah, just tired." Harry nodded like he understood. "This place is a lot." Susan's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Yeah. Harry hesitated, then chose the safest hook. He had something true, something harmless. Hufflepuff's been under pressure, Harry said, with the sprouts and everything. Susan's eyes flicked away. People keep staring. Like we're supposed to. Do something. Harry kept his expression soft. You don't have to fix it. Susan looked at him sharply, like she didn't expect anyone to say that. Harry felt that familiar pressure rise in his head, nudge, soften, pull the truth out of her like thread. He didn't. Instead, he did something far harder. He stayed honest. If there's something weird going on, Harry said, voice low, you can tell someone. A professor. Sprout. Susan's face went pale. That was all the confirmation Harry needed. Susan swallowed. Weird. Harry shrugged lightly, as if he wasn't sure of himself. I just got the feeling. Susan's fingers tightened on her books. It's nothing. Harry nodded immediately, backing off. Okay. Susan exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. I should go. Yeah, Harry said softly. Susan hurried away down the corridor. Harry stood still for a moment, staring after her. She didn't deny it with confidence. She denied it with fear. And that meant whatever was in that notebook wasn't just talking. It was holding her. Harry's scar tingled again. Hungry. The decoy. If someone was altering texts and leaving serpent knot marks, then Harry needed proof of one thing. Was it Loki? Or was it someone borrowing Harry's symbol to play the same game? Harry couldn't ask professors. He couldn't ask Hermione without opening a door he wasn't ready to walk through. So he did what Loki had taught him without meaning to. He made a decoy. That afternoon, Harry went to the library alone. He didn't bring Ron. Too loud. He didn't bring Hermione. Too sharp. He moved like a shadow between shelves, careful to stay in the blind spots of the room's natural attention. He wasn't invisible. Hogwarts wasn't that kind of place, but he was something else. Forgettable. Harry slipped into the index section and opened a drawer near the middle one that looked used but not watched. He pulled out a card at random and slid it aside. Then he placed a fresh card in the drawer. On it, he wrote neatly, "To whoever thinks they can write reality. I see you. Ush." He stared at the card for a moment. It looked childish. Perfect. Then, with a careful breath, he let the smallest thread of glamour touch the ink, so small it barely shimmered. Not to change the message, just to make it react if someone with strange magic touched it. Like a tripwire. Harry's head throbbed immediately, a sharp warning behind his eyes. He clenched his jaw and held steady until the shimmer settled. Then he slid the drawer closed and walked away like nothing had happened. It was a stupid trap, which meant it was brilliant, because only someone arrogant would answer it. The answer that wasn't an answer. 2 hours later, Harry returned. The library was busy, students hunched over books, whispering, tapping quills. Ravenclaws looked like they were guarding treasure. Hufflepuffs looked tired. Gryffindors looked annoyed at how quiet everything was. Harry moved to the index drawers casually. He opened the one he'd used. His card was still there. But there was something new. A second card had been tucked behind it, thin, neat, written in the same elegant handwriting Hermione had complained about. Harry's stomach turned cold. He pulled it out carefully. The card read, "You see what I allow. T." Harry's scar flared with a sharp tingle. Not pain. Recognition with teeth. Harry's fingers went cold. The glamour thread he'd placed on his own card pulsed faintly, like it had been brushed by something that didn't care about subtlety. Harry forced himself to breathe evenly, face blank. A Ravenclaw nearby glanced over suspiciously, so Harry slid both cards into his pocket and walked away. His heartbeat was steady, but his mind was screaming. Not Loki. This didn't feel like Loki. Loki's messages were teasing, taunting, proud. This message wasn't playful. It was possessive. You see what I allow. Like Harry's eyes belonged to someone else. Harry's stomach clenched. Two tricksters. One of them laughed. The other one claimed. Riddle week becomes a knife. That night, Ravenclaw posted the next riddle. Harry didn't plan to go. He went anyway, because now the riddles weren't just games. They were communication. The library was crowded again, students pressed in close, faces lit by candlelight and competition. The new riddle glowed on parchment. I speak in ink and sleep in skin. I promise truth and call it sin. I make you strong by making you small. Open me once, and you'll hear the fall. What am I? Ron squinted. That's a book again. Hermione frowned, uneasy. It's not just book. It feels pointed. Harry's scar tingled sharply. He could feel eyes on him, not just curious student eyes. The kind of attention that weighed. Harry looked around. Adrian Pusey stood near the back, arms folded, watching the crowd like he was watching a duel. Pusey's eyes met Harry's. Pusey smiled faintly. Harry's stomach tightened. Then, in the front row, Susan Bones stepped forward. She looked pale, but there was something different in her posture, like someone had whispered courage into her spine. Susan raised her hand slightly, hesitant. I think. Susan began softly. It's a diary. The room murmured. Ravenclaws leaned in. Slytherins smirked. Gryffindors looked confused. Hermione's eyes widened. That actually makes sense. Susan swallowed and nodded, like she was relieved someone agreed. And Harry felt ice slide down his spine. Because Susan didn't just solve the riddle. She solved it like she'd been told. Harry's scar tingled. Hungry. The accident. The next day, someone got hurt. Not badly, not permanently, but enough to change the shape of the castle's mood. It happened in defense. Quirrell assigned pairs to practice a simple counterjinx minor, harmless, the kind that made your ears buzz or your shoelaces tie themselves together. Hermione paired with Harry because Hermione always paired with Harry if she could. Ron paired with Neville because Ron couldn't refuse Neville's nervous hope. On the other side of the room, a Ravenclaw boy Terry Boot paired with a Hufflepuff girl, Susan Bones. Harry's eyes snapped to Susan immediately. Susan's hands trembled around her wand. Terry looked focused, serious, like he was treating this like a duel. Quirrell stuttered instructions. And remember, keep it light, nothing dramatic. Susan nodded quickly. Terry cast first a mild jinx that made Susan's collar itch. Susan winced, then raised her wand. Her lips moved. Harry couldn't hear the incantation clearly. But he saw something subtle, something wrong. Susan's eyes flicked down to her bag, like she was remembering a line she'd read. Then Susan spoke, and the air snapped. Not like a strong spell, like a misspoken one. A tiny burst of force hit Terry's wand hand. Terry yelped and dropped his wand. The wand rolled across the floor, sparked, and a small burst of blue-white energy zipped out, clipping Terry's forearm. Terry hissed in pain, clutching his arm. A thin burn line appeared, angry, immediate. The classroom froze. Quirrell squeaked. And Mr. Boot. Hermione lunged forward instinctively, already reaching in her bag for a cloth. Harry stood very still, heart pounding, because that shouldn't have happened from a minor counterjinx. Unless the incantation was wrong. Unless someone had taught Susan wrong on purpose. Susan stared at Terry's burn, horror-struck. I didn't, she stammered, voice cracking. I didn't mean. Terry's face flushed with pain and anger. What did you say? Susan's eyes filled with tears. I read it in. She stopped abruptly, mouth snapping shut like she'd almost confessed something forbidden. Harry's scar tingled sharply. Quirrell hurried over, fumbling for a healing salve. The room buzzed. Ravenclaws whispered angrily. Hufflepuffs looked panicked. Gryffindors watched tense. Slytherins looked entertained. Ron muttered, See? Someone's sabotaging again. Hermione shot him a look, but her face was pale. Harry's head throbbed, because the accident wasn't random. It was a demonstration. Someone was showing the castle what happens when knowledge becomes poison. Someone was making sure the fear stayed fed. And Susan looked like a puppet, realizing it had strings. Harry's hands curled into fists. He didn't want to play anymore. But the game had already invited a second player. A page where it shouldn't be. That night, Harry returned to the dormitory with his stomach in knots. Hermione had spent an hour arguing that Susan needed comfort, not suspicion. Ron had spent an hour arguing that someone should get punished for once. Harry had spent the entire time thinking one thing. Find a source. He climbed out of bed and pulled his charms book onto his lap, pretending to read. He opened it. A folded page slipped out and landed on the blanket. Harry froze. He hadn't put anything in there. His hands went cold as he unfolded the page. It was blank at first. Then ink seeped into it like blood into cloth, slow, deliberate, elegant. Words formed. Harry, you are clever, but you are not alone. Harry's scar tingled hard enough to make him flinch. The ink continued. This castle loves masks. I can teach you how to wear yours properly. Harry's throat went dry. The final line wrote itself with a flourish that felt like a smile. Meet me where the library keeps what it pretends not to have. TMR. Harry's fingers shook. He stared at the initials until his vision blurred. This wasn't Loki. Loki would never sign with a schoolboy's initials like he was proud of them. This was something else. Something patient. Something that wanted Harry to come closer. Harry swallowed, pulse racing. He could ignore it. He should ignore it. But the memory of Terry Boots' burned arm flashed in his mind. Susan's terrified face. The footnotes. The riddles. The index marks. Someone was hurting people with ink and lies. And Harry knew lies. He knew how they worked. He knew how they spread. He also knew that if he didn't move first, he'd spend the rest of the year reacting. Harry folded the page carefully and slid it under his pillow. Then he lay back, staring at the canopy, listening to Ron's breathing. His scar tingled faintly like it knew the name. In the dark, Harry whispered to himself, as if saying it out loud might anchor him. Tom, Marvolo, Riddle. The scar pulsed. Hungry. And somewhere deep inside Harry's mind, behind the glass of his thoughts, he felt something answer not Loki's laughter, but a colder satisfaction. As if the other trickster had finally gotten what he wanted. Harry's attention. Harry waited until the tower slept. Not because he liked sneaking out. Because Hogwarts had taught him a truth so sharp it hurt. If you wanted to understand a story, you had to find where it was written when no one was watching. Ron's bed creaked once as he rolled over, mumbling something about bloody staircases. Seamus sighed in his sleep. Neville made a small, anxious noise like even his dreams were worried. Harry lay still until the room fell into that deep, heavy quiet that meant safe enough. Then he slid out from under his covers, pulled on his robe, and moved like a shadow. The folded page under his pillow felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Meet me where the library keeps what it pretends not to have. TMR. Harry didn't know if he was walking into a trap. He knew he already was. The castle at night. Hogwarts at night didn't feel like Hogwarts during the day. During the day, it was loud, warm, full of rules and teachers and laughter. At night, it became something older stone and whispers and portraits that pretended not to watch. Harry moved down corridors lit by sparse torches. Every footstep sounded too loud. He kept his breathing steady. He told himself, repeatedly, that he was only going to look. He wasn't going to bargain. He wasn't going to join. He wasn't going to let anyone Loki, Riddle, the castle itself, turn him into a weapon again. The problem was, he didn't trust himself. Because he could still feel that subtle pull inside his mind, the trickster thread that enjoyed patterns and opportunities. So Harry clung to something else instead. Susan's scared face. Terry Boots' burned arm. Hannah's ruined sprouts. If this TMR was doing it, if Riddle was feeding the castle fear through ink and whispers, Harry couldn't pretend it was just house drama anymore. It was a predator testing its claws. Harry reached the library doors and paused. The library was never fully dark. Hogwarts refused to let knowledge sleep completely. A faint glow leaked from under the doors. Harry placed his hand on the door handle. Cold metal. Warm fear. He pushed. The door opened with a soft sigh, like the library had been expecting him. Madame Pants does not sleep. Harry stepped inside. Rows of shelves stood like black teeth in the gloom. Floating candles hovered low, dimmed but still alive. And near the front desk, a shape moved. Harry froze. Madame Pants sat behind her desk with a shawl around her shoulders, quill in hand, writing. Harry's stomach dropped. Of course she was awake. Madame Pants was the kind of person who would haunt a library even after death just to shush ghosts. Harry backed slowly, heart hammering. Then he stopped because the door behind him creaked faintly. Pants's head snapped up. Her eyes sharp, furious, swept the shadows. Who was there? She hissed. Harry's scar tingled. The pressure rose behind his eyes. A nudge of glamour would be easy, just a ripple of shadow, a suggestion that she'd imagined it, a soft bend of attention. Harry swallowed hard. Easy wasn't always safe. But he didn't have time to argue with his conscience in the doorway. Harry inhaled slowly and let a thin veil of sear slide across the air, not to erase himself, not true invisibility, but to dull the library's focus on him. Like taking a bright object and covering it with cloth. His head throbbed immediately. Sharp pain behind the eyes, the price of weaving lies into a place that hated them. Pants's gaze passed right over him. She frowned, annoyed, then muttered, peeves, as if the world's problems always came back to that one name. She went back to writing. Harry stood perfectly still until his heartbeat stopped trying to escape his ribs. Then he moved slow, careful between shelves. The veil didn't make him invisible. It made him forgettable. That was the difference. That was the danger. Because forgettable was what he'd been on Privet Drive. And now he was doing it on purpose. Harry's stomach twisted. He kept going anyway. Where the library pretends. Riddle's message had been precise in the worst way. Where the library keeps what it pretends not to have. That wasn't the restricted section. That was the obvious answer. This sounded like something hidden even from rules. Harry moved deeper into the stacks, passing shelves labeled Transfiguration, Charms, Wand Lore, Magical Theory. He listened. The library made sounds at night, soft shifting, the quiet creak of settling wood, the faint flutter of pages turning without hands. Harry turned down an aisle he'd never noticed before. The sign at its entrance was half hidden by shadow. It read, Misfiled / return later. Harry stared. Misfiled. Like someone had built a whole place for things that didn't belong. Harry stepped into the aisle. The air changed instantly. Colder, drier, like the warmth of the library was being held back by an invisible curtain. His scar tingled again, stronger now. Warning. Recognition. And beneath it, something else. Anticipation. Harry forced himself forward. At the end of the aisle sat a plain wooden cabinet with no label and a tarnished lock that looked older than Hogwarts itself. Harry stared at it. The cabinet felt awake, like the mirror had felt, like a doorway pretending to be furniture. Harry swallowed and reached out. His fingers brushed the lock, and the cabinet clicked open on its own. Harry froze, hands still hovering. Slowly, the door swung wider. Inside was not a shelf of books. It was a single object. A ledger. Big and heavy, bound in cracked black leather. No title, no author. Just blankness, like it didn't want a name. Harry's breath came shallow. He leaned closer. The ledger was open already. Blank pages. No ink. Harry stared, waiting for movement. Nothing. He exhaled slowly, trying not to feel foolish. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe this was. Then ink bled into the page as if the paper had been cut. Words formed in elegant script. You came. Harry's skin went cold. He didn't speak. The ink continued, smooth and confident. You shouldn't have, but you did. That means you're like me. Harry's jaw tightened. He forced himself to answer quietly, controlled. I'm not like you. A pause. Then ink wrote. Oh. Then why are you here, Harry Potter? Harry's stomach twisted. He could lie. He was good at lying. But this intelligence in ink fed on lies. It lived in them. So Harry chose truth. Because people are getting hurt. The words sat there for a moment, as if the ledger was considering whether that answer amused it. Then the ink wrote. Hurt is instruction. Harry's anger flared hot. No, hurt is cruelty. Sometimes they're the same. The ledger replied. Harry clenched his fists. You're Tom Riddle. The ink paused, then wrote, slowly, like a smile made of letters. That name tastes better on your tongue than mine. Harry's scar tingled. You're not alive, Harry said, voice tight. You're, what, a memory? The ink curled into new words. A record. A seed. A promise. Harry's throat went dry. Because those words didn't sound like a first year's trick. They sounded like something ancient wearing a schoolboy's handwriting. Harry stared at the blank air above the ledger, half expecting a face to appear. Nothing did, but the presence felt close, like someone standing behind him, reading over his shoulder. Power levels, the difference between a whisper and a chain. Harry forced himself to breathe. Stop altering books, Harry said. Stop feeding rumors. Stop. The ink cut him off. You're not angry because I did it. You're angry because you didn't think of it first. Harry flinched. His head throbbed. He hated that the words hit something true. Harry spoke carefully. You're using ink like a curse. You're guiding people into mistakes. Guiding, the ledger wrote, amused. Such a gentle word for what you do. Harry's stomach turned. I didn't burn Terry Boot. No, the ink wrote. You only taught the castle to believe in fire. Harry's hand shook. He swallowed hard. What do you want? The page stayed blank for a heartbeat. Then ink flowed again, slower now, deliberate like a teacher writing a lesson. I want order. Harry blinked. That wasn't what he expected. Chaos made sense. Mischief made sense. Cruelty made sense. Order? The ink continued. This school is a kingdom with 4 thrones and no king. Children rule it with emotion. Teachers pretend they do. You can feel the weakness, can't you? Harry's scar tingled faintly. His own power Loki's thread worked on perception, on attention, on the little spaces between what someone saw and what they assumed. Riddle's power was different. Ink was permanent. Ink didn't just nudge a thought. Ink made a thought into a rule. A record. A chain. Harry felt cold dread in his stomach. You're making people paranoid, Harry said. That isn't order. The ink replied instantly. It's preparation. When they're afraid, they look for leadership. Harry's mouth went dry. No, Harry said. The ledger's ink slowed, like it was savoring the next line. Yes. And you, Harry Potter, are the perfect symbol. Harry's scar pulsed. Fame. Legend. The boy who lived. Harry clenched his jaw. I don't want to lead anyone. Everyone says that before they taste control. The ink wrote. Harry felt the pressure rise behind his eyes, his instinct to counter, to nudge, to twist this conversation, so he held the advantage. But glamour wouldn't work on ink. You couldn't charm a chain into becoming a ribbon. Harry forced a different approach. You hurt Susan, he said flatly. You put words in her notebook. The ink paused, then wrote. Susan Bones was lonely. I offered her a voice that listened. Harry's throat tightened. That's not listening. That's using. Is it? The ledger wrote. You have friends now, Harry. Do you listen? Or do you weigh them? Harry flinched. Because he did weigh them. He hated that he did. He hated that Riddle knew. Harry's voice came out hoarse. You're not helping her. You're making her dependent. A long pause. Then Ink wrote calmly. Dependency is just loyalty without romance. Harry's stomach turned. That sentence wasn't a child's sentence. That was a ruler's sentence. Harry took a slow step back from the cabinet, breathing hard. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't even just a Horcrux-like echo. This was a mind learning how to take up space. And it was looking at Harry like a rival. Or worse, a partner. Dumbledore's on knees. Above them, somewhere in the castle, a staircase creaked. Harry froze. The ledger went still. The air sharpened, as if the library itself had just noticed something it didn't like. Harry's scar tingled hard warning. He turned his head slowly toward the aisle entrance. A faint light moved across the floor. Not candlelight. A deliberate glow, like someone carrying a lantern. Harry's breath caught. Dumbledore. Not because he'd seen him, because he could feel that kind of attention. The same lantern-light presence from his shelves earlier. The kind that made hiding feel foolish. The ledger's ink flowed quickly now, urgent. They're coming. Harry's pulse jumped. They? He whispered. The ones who think they own stories. The light grew closer. Harry's mind raced. If Dumbledore found him here with this ledger, if Dumbledore saw him standing in the misfiled aisle, Harry wouldn't just be Harry Potter anymore. He'd be suspect. And suspects got watched. Watched meant discovered. Discovered meant caged. Harry's throat tightened. He made a choice. Not a clever one. A desperate one. He reached into the cabinet, grabbed the ledger, and slammed it shut. The moment his fingers touched the leather, ice shot through his hand. Not frost, something else. A cold that felt like a mind snapping its teeth. Harry hissed, but didn't let go. He shoved the ledger back into the cabinet and closed the door. The lock clicked. The cabinet looked ordinary again, like nothing had happened. Harry stepped back, breathing hard. The lantern light rounded the corner into the aisle. And for a heartbeat, Harry saw just a glimpse. Not Dumbledore. A silver cat, sleek and luminous, moving silently along the shelves. McGonagall's animagus form. Harry's blood went colder. She paused, head tilting as if sniffing the air. Harry felt the throb behind his eyes as his glamour veil strained. McGonagall's cat eyes slid over him. For a heartbeat, Harry was sure she saw him. Then she looked away, tail flicking, and padded forward. Harry didn't move. He didn't breathe. The cat passed within a yard of him. And as she did, Harry felt something else pass too, an invisible pressure in the air, like a net being drawn through the stacks. Not McGonagall. Something behind her. A ward. A detection charm. A careful sweep. Harry's scar tingled sharply. The glamour veil didn't hide him from magic. It only dulled attention. And this wasn't attention. It was search. Harry forced himself not to panic. He stayed pressed between shelves, body rigid, heart hammering. McGonagall reached the end of the misfiled aisle, paused, then turned back the way she came. The lantern light receded with her. Harry exhaled shakily too soon. A portrait on a nearby wall yawned and mumbled, "Sneaky, sneaky." Harry froze again. Then the portrait's eyes opened wider, and it smirked. The portrait didn't shout. It didn't call guards. It just watched amused. Harry swallowed hard. Some things in Hogwarts didn't need evidence. They just needed entertainment. The last line. Harry waited until the aisle was empty and the air felt less tight. Then he opened the cabinet a fraction, just enough to peek. The ledger was still there. Closed. Silent. He should leave. He did leave. But as he turned to go, ink seeped through the leather cover like it wasn't fully contained. Words formed across the black, binding visible even with the book shut. Run if you want. You'll still come back. Harry's stomach dropped. He slammed the cabinet shut and backed away, breathing hard. He fled the library the way you fled a room where someone had just said your name in the dark. By the time he reached the corridor outside, his head was pounding and his hands were shaking. He pressed his palm against his scar. It tingled faintly, like a bruise that remembered the punch. Harry didn't go straight back to Gryffindor Tower. He couldn't. He wandered for a while through corridors, tried to calm down, try to feel like a kid again. It didn't work, because now he knew there was another schemer in Hogwarts. Not playful like Loki, not impulsive like Gryffindor, not proud like Slytherin, not righteous like Hufflepuff, not competitive like Ravenclaw. Something colder, something that used order the way Loki used chaos. And Dumbledore had begun to sweep the stacks, which meant Dumbledore was uneasy. And when Dumbledore was uneasy, the whole castle eventually noticed. Harry finally returned to the dormitory near dawn, slipping into bed just before morning stirred. He lay staring at the canopy, eyes burning, mind racing. The last thing he remembered before exhaustion pulled him under was the line on the ledger's cover ink like a smile. You'll still come back. And a terrifying part? A part of Harry small, wounded, clever whispered back into the dark. Maybe. By the time Harry woke up, the castle felt like it had decided to breathe differently. Not louder. Tighter. Like someone had pulled an invisible cord around Hogwarts' ribs. Ron complained about it first, of course, he did while they dressed for breakfast. You feel it? Ron muttered, yanking on his jumper. Like the hallways are watching. Seamus snorted. They're watching. It's Hogwarts. Hermione, who was brushing her hair with violent focus, frowned. Actually, I've noticed something too. Ron blinked. You? Noticing weird castle stuff? Wow, in times. Hermione ignored him. The portraits are quieter. Harry didn't react outwardly. Inside, his stomach turned cold, because he knew what that meant. Dumbledore was tightening something. Wards, patrols, maybe even the castle itself, if Dumbledore could ask Hogwarts to cooperate, which Harry suspected he could. And if Dumbledore was tightening the net, it was because he'd sensed a predator. Or sensed Harry. Harry rubbed his scar lightly, as if it were a nervous habit. His scar tingled faintly, like it remembered the ledger's ink breathing through leather. Harry kept his face calm. He couldn't afford to look like prey. Breakfast, the calm before the shove. The great hall was full, but the sound was wrong. Not joyful chatter. A restless murmur that kept dipping into sudden pockets of silence, like people were listening for something to happen. At the staff table, Professor Sprout spoke quietly to Flitwick, her expression tight. McGonagall sat rigid, eyes scanning. Snape looked mildly amused, which only made the tension worse. And Dumbledore. Dumbledore smiled, as he always did, but the smile sat differently today. It wasn't a celebration smile. It was a prepared smile, like someone smiling in front of a crowd while their hand hovered near a wand. Harry's scar tingled. Hermione leaned in toward Harry and Ron, whispering urgently, "Did you hear? There were searches last night." Ron's eyes widened. Searches? Like teachers? Hermione nodded. Filch and McGonagall. People say they were checking corridors and common room entrances. Looking for. She cut herself off, glancing around. Looking for what? Ron pressed. Hermione lowered her voice. Something that's been tampering with books. Something that's been feeding rumors. Something that's coordinated. Harry's stomach clenched. Ron muttered, finally. Hermione's eyes flicked to Harry. You're quiet again. Harry forced a shrug. Just tired. Hermione didn't look convinced, but before she could push, the hall suddenly rippled. Whispers surged like a wave. Harry turned his head and saw why. A student had entered the great hall wearing, of all things, two ties. A Gryffindor tie knotted over a Slytherin tie, like a joke someone had dared them to make. The student's face was pale, eyes wide, as if they didn't fully understand why they'd done it. The great hall erupted. Gryffindors barked laughter and shouted insults. Slytherins stood up, furious. Hufflepuffs looked uncomfortable. Ravenclaws leaned forward, hungry for the spectacle. Ron stared, startled. What idiot? Hermione's voice went tight. That's not funny. Harry's scar tingled sharply, because he recognized the pattern. That wasn't organic stupidity. That was a push. A precise, humiliating push that made both houses feel mocked. A public spark. And Harry hadn't lit it. The student, an older Ravenclaw boy, looked like he might cry. He fumbled at the ties as if trying to remove them. Then he froze, like a puppet whose strings suddenly went taut. His eyes lifted blank, distant, and he spoke in a calm voice that didn't match his face at all. Maybe we should stop pretending we're different, the boy said, voice oddly steady. Maybe we should admit the houses are a joke. The room went silent for half a heartbeat. Then Slytherin exploded. Draco Malfoy's voice cut through like a whip. Take that off, you filthy little crow. Gryffindor shouted back. Someone laughed. Someone threw a bread roll. The boy flinched, coming back to himself, confusion flooding his face. Harry felt cold settle in his chest. This was Riddle. This was ink magic without ink. Influence without glamour. Control without laughter. And it was happening in front of the entire school. Harry glanced up at the staff table. Dumbledore's eyes were on the Ravenclaw boy. Not angry. Measuring. Like a chess player watching a piece move itself. Dumbledore stood slowly. The room quieted under the weight of his presence. Mr. Corner, Dumbledore said gently. The Ravenclaw boy, Michael Corner, flinched hard. Yes, sir, he stammered. Dumbledore's voice was calm, but something about it felt like a net being drawn. Would you come speak with me after breakfast? Dumbledore asked. Michael's face drained of color. Yes, sir, he whispered. Dumbledore nodded, still calm. And everyone else seethed. Begin your day. Let us not turn humiliation into tradition. The hall slowly resumed motion, but the mood had shifted. The castle wasn't just divided anymore. It was being provoked publicly. Harry's scar tingled, and deep in his mind, he felt that hungry, satisfied pressure again. Not Loki. Riddle. The Distraction. House War, version 2. By lunchtime, the story had mutated. It always did. Corner said the houses are fake. No, he said Gryffindor and Slytherin should merge. No, he said Dumbledore made the houses to control us. No, he said Slytherins are basically evil by design. No, he said Gryffindors are brainless. The rumor ran faster than any owl. And the best part for whoever was feeding it was that everyone believed the version that offended them most. Harry watched it spread like a disease. Students clustered in corridors. Arguments sparked at corners. Someone had hexed a banner, so it displayed the wrong house colors for 5 minutes before a professor corrected it. 5 minutes was all it took to start a screaming match. Hufflepuffs tightened into their own groups, avoiding everyone else. Ravenclaws began carrying books like shields. Gryffindors started traveling in packs. Slytherins started smiling like they were enjoying the chaos, even when their eyes were too sharp to be truly amused. And through it all, teachers moved like patrols. McGonagall everywhere. Flitwick trying to soothe. Sprout trying to protect her students. Snape gliding like he was waiting for the moment someone crossed a line. And Dumbledore. Dumbledore disappeared, which meant Dumbledore was working. Harry's stomach tightened, because Riddle didn't do this to hurt Michael Corner. Not really. He did it to make the castle loud, because loud meant no one noticed quiet things. Quiet things like a headmaster walking into a trap. Harry swallowed. Riddle's ledger had said, "They're coming. The ones who think they own stories." That wasn't a warning for Harry. That was a promise. The net tightens. That evening, Hermione burst into the Gryffindor common room like a storm. Ron looked up from a chessboard. What now? Hermione's eyes were bright with urgency. Dumbledore has suspended inter-house activities. Ron blinked. Like what? Like study groups? Hermione said. Like the Riddle Week contest. Like shared practice sessions. Anything that mixes houses. Ron whistled. Blimey. Hermione paced. He's trying to reduce friction points. He thinks the conflict is being artificially worsened. Ron crossed his arms. Because it is. Hermione stopped pacing and stared at Harry. You've been in the library a lot, she said suddenly. Harry's stomach dropped. Ron blinked. What's it got to do with anything? Hermione didn't look at Ron. Harry, have you noticed anything off? About the books? About the notes? About... Harry felt that pressure behind his eyes rise. The instinct to nudge her away from this line of thought. He didn't. He forced himself to answer with a careful truth. I've noticed things, Harry said quietly. Hermione's expression sharpened. What things? Harry's mind raced. If he told Hermione about the ledger, she'd go to Dumbledore. If Hermione went to Dumbledore, Dumbledore would find the cabinet. If Dumbledore found the cabinet, Riddle would know. And if Riddle knew... Harry swallowed. He saw Terry's burned arm again. Susan's frightened face. He couldn't let this continue. But he also couldn't hand Dumbledore a direct line to the secret he'd been carrying since the mirror. Harry chose a middle path that tasted like ash. Someone's adding false notes in books, Harry said. Footnotes. Index cards. Hermione's eyes widened. I knew it. Ron leaned forward, angry. Who's doing it? Harry shook his head. I don't know, but it's clever. Hermione's gaze narrowed. Clever like. Student clever? Or clever like? Planned? Harry hesitated a beat too long. Hermione saw it. Her voice went softer. Harry, you're scared. Ron's anger faltered. Mate? Harry's throat tightened. He could lie. He could say he was just tired. But Hermione's eyes were too sharp, and Ron's concern was too real. So Harry gave them something honest, just not everything. I think, Harry said quietly, someone is trying to make the school fight, so no one notices what they're actually doing. Hermione's face paled. What are they actually doing? Harry stared at the fire. He didn't know. Not fully. But he could guess. Setting a trap, Harry said. Ron scoffed. For who? Teachers? Harry's scar tingled. Harry's voice came out low. For Dumbledore. Hermione went very still. Ron blinked. That's insane. Hermione whispered, unless the person doing it is dangerous. Harry didn't answer. Because if he said the name, it would become more real. And already felt too real. The trap springs. Harry didn't sleep. He couldn't. His mind replayed the ledger's words, the moving ink, the way McGonagall's cat eyes had swept past him. The castle was tightening. Riddle was provoking. Dumbledore was hunting. And Harry was standing between them with a secret in his pocket that felt like it might burn through the fabric. Near midnight, a soft tapping came at the dormitory window. Harry's head snapped up. An owl perched there. Not the school owls. Not Hedwig. Harry didn't even have Hedwig yet in this version of the year. This owl was sleek and dark, eyes too bright. It carried a small strip of parchment tied to its leg. Harry's stomach turned cold. He slid out of bed, moved quietly, and opened the window. The owl hopped in, dropped the parchment into his hand, and immediately took off, vanishing into the night. Harry unfolded the strip. At first it was blank. Then ink appeared slow, elegant, confident. Your headmaster is walking into a room he should not enter. Harry's blood went cold. The ink continued. He thinks he is hunting a prank. He is hunting a crown. Harry's scar tingled sharply. Harry's hands shook. He read the last line twice. If you want the school intact, come now. TMR. Harry's stomach dropped. This wasn't just warning. This was control. Riddle wasn't asking. He was summoning. Harry stood very still in the dark dormitory. Ron slept. Neville slept. Seamus slept. Harry could leave and go after Dumbledore. Or he could stay and let whatever was happening happen. If Dumbledore got hurt or worse, Hogwarts would erupt. Houses wouldn't just rival. They'd war. And Harry knew what war did to children. He'd lived in a cupboard with the echo of violence in the walls. Harry clenched the parchment until it crumpled. He whispered, voice shaking, "You're doing this on purpose." The parchment didn't answer. But the ink bled one final line into the paper like a smile carved into flesh. Of course. Harry's pulse thundered. He grabbed his robe, shoved his feet in his shoes, and slipped out of the dormitory. Not because Riddle ordered him, because Harry couldn't let Riddle decide what happened next. He moved through the corridors fast, heart hammering. The castle felt colder now, like it knew something dangerous was moving through it. As Harry ran, he saw a faint shimmer across the stone wall's wards. Dumbledore's net. Harry slipped past them, feeling his glamour thread strain. Pain spiked behind his eyes. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. Down the stairs. Through a corridor. Past a portrait that pretended to sleep. Then, he saw it. A door half open near a dark hallway Harry had never explored. Warm light spilled from within. Harry slowed, breath ragged. Inside the room, he could hear voices. One calm. One not. A soft, polite voice, stuttering slightly. Quirrell. And another voice, older, warm, steady. Dumbledore. Harry's blood went cold. Quirrell wasn't supposed to be here. Quirrell wasn't supposed to be part of this. Unless Quirrell was the bait. Harry crept closer, heart hammering. Through the crack in the door, he saw Dumbledore standing with his wand lowered, not relaxed, but not aggressive. Quirrell sat at a desk, pale and sweating. Dumbledore's voice was gentle. "Tell me, Quirinus, where did you find the altered texts?" Quirrell's hand shook. "I don't know, Headmaster, I swear." Dumbledore's eyes were kind, but the air around him felt like restrained power. The room's shadows seemed to tighten. And then behind Quirrell, just barely visible in the dim, Harry saw it. A black leather ledger on the desk. Closed. Silent. But Harry felt it. A presence like a smile without warmth. Riddle had moved the ledger. He'd brought it here. He put it in front of Dumbledore on purpose. Harry's scar tingled so hard it burned. And in that moment, Harry understood the trap. Riddle didn't want Dumbledore to find him. He wanted Dumbledore to touch him. Because touching the ledger wasn't like reading a rumor. It was like putting your hand on a chain. Harry's stomach dropped. Dumbledore stepped closer to the desk, gaze settling on the ledger. His hand lifted slightly, as if he might open it. Harry's heart slammed against his ribs. He had to act. Now. But if he burst in, he'd expose himself. Expose his night sneaking. Expose his knowledge. Expose everything. Harry swallowed hard. Then he made the only move left to him. Not the clever move. Not the safe move. The human move. He pushed the door open. Hard. It banged against the wall. Dumbledore and Quirrell both snapped toward him. Harry stepped into the light, chest heaving, face pale. "Professor," Harry blurted, voice rough. "Don't touch it." Silence hit like a wall. Dumbledore stared at Harry. Quirrell stared too, fear and confusion tangled. Dumbledore's expression didn't change dramatically, but Harry saw it anyway. The tiniest tightening around Dumbledore's eyes. Unease. Not because of the ledger. Because of Harry. Because Harry had known. And the moment Harry spoke, the trap snapped shut around him too. The door's echo died slowly, like the castle itself was holding its breath. Harry stood in the doorway with his heart trying to break out of his ribs, the words he'd blurted still ringing in the air. Professor, don't touch it. Dumbledore didn't move. Quirrell didn't move. Even the candle flames seemed to go still, their light suddenly too sharp, too honest. The black ledger sat on the desk between them like a third person in the room, silent, patient, confident. Dumbledore's gaze rested on Harry for a long moment. Not angry, not shocked, just measuring like he was reading a page no one else could see. Mr. Potter, Dumbledore said gently, "It is very late." Harry swallowed hard. His throat felt dry as sand. "I couldn't sleep." Quirrell's voice wobbled. "P. Potter? Why is he?" Dumbledore lifted a hand without looking at Quirrell, and Quirrell fell quiet, as if the air itself had been commanded. Dumbledore stepped away from the desk slowly, deliberately. Away from the ledger. Harry felt a rush of relief, so sharp it almost made his knees buckle. Dumbledore's eyes stayed on Harry. "You said don't touch it. That implies you know what it is." Harry's scar tingled. Behind his eyes, pain pulsed his glamour thread, straining under the pressure of attention. Harry forced his face neutral. "I saw something like it in the library." That was true. It was also the most dangerous truth he could have chosen. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened slightly. "Did you?" Quirrell's breathing became fast and shallow. "I didn't put it there, headmaster, I swear." Dumbledore finally looked at Quirrell. "I believe you, Quirinus." Quirrell blinked, stunned. Dumbledore looked back at Harry. "And I believe," Dumbledore continued softly, "that you did not come here by accident." Harry's stomach dropped. Because Dumbledore hadn't accused him. He'd done something worse. He'd understood him. Harry's hands shook slightly at his sides. He clenched them in a fist to steady them. "Why are you here, Harry?" Dumbledore asked gently. The ledger sat silent. But Harry could feel it anyway, like a grin behind glass. "Say the truth," it seemed to whisper without words. "Say it out loud. Let the world turn." Harry swallowed hard. He couldn't tell Dumbledore everything. He couldn't say, "The ledger writes back. It calls itself TMR. It's feeding the houses like a beast." Because the moment Harry spoke that name, the predator would know it had won something precious. Dumbledore's full attention. And once Dumbledore looked directly at it, Riddle's trap might spring anyway. Harry chose a different truth. A smaller one. "A note," Harry said quietly. "I got a note. It said you're going to touch something dangerous." Quirrell flinched. "A note?" Dumbledore's eyes softened slightly, but the unease remained. "A note from whom?" Harry's heart pounded. He could say, "I don't know." He could lie. But Dumbledore would hear the lie the way a musician hears a wrong note. Harry's scar tingled hard. His voice came out steady through sheer force of will. "I don't know, sir. It didn't say." Dumbledore studied him. Then, slowly, he smiled faintly. Not amusement. Acknowledgement. "Very well," Dumbledore said, "and we shall treat it as what it is." He turned toward the desk. Harry's blood went cold again. Dumbledore didn't reach for the ledger. He reached for a small silver instrument from his robe, an object like a delicate compass, rings inside rings, humming faintly with light. He placed it on the desk near the ledger without touching the book. The instrument's rings began to rotate. The air changed. Harry felt it like pressure in his ears, like the room had become deeper, heavier, older. Quirrell whimpered softly. The rings spun faster. And then, the instrument's light turned dull, then sickly gray. Dumbledore's expression tightened. Interesting, he murmured. Harry's stomach sank. Dumbledore had confirmed something. Not necessarily Tom Riddle, but dangerous. Quirinus, Dumbledore said softly, you may go. Quirrell blinked. Be but. Go, Dumbledore repeated, and the word carried so much quiet authority that Quirrell's legs moved before his mind could argue. Quirrell shuffled past Harry, eyes wide with fear, and fled the room. Now it was just Harry and Dumbledore, and the ledger, and a silent grin in the air. Dumbledore looked at Harry again. Harry, Dumbledore said, no, Mr. Potter now. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Harry's throat tightened. Yes, sir. Dumbledore's voice was gentle, but the question landed like a blade laid carefully on a table. Did you touch this book? Harry's scar tingled sharply, like a warning bell. He remembered the cold leather biting his fingers. He remembered the teeth like hunger. Harry swallowed hard. If he lied and said no, and Dumbledore somehow knew. If he told the truth and said yes. Either way, he was exposed. Harry's hands shook. He forced them still. I closed the cabinet, Harry said carefully. In the library. I didn't open it. Not a lie. Not the full truth. A controlled truth. Dumbledore watched him quietly. Harry felt the room constrict around the silence. Then Dumbledore nodded slowly. Thank you. Harry's stomach dropped. Dumbledore believed him. Or Dumbledore was letting him believe he believed him. Those were not the same thing. Dumbledore's gaze drifted to the ledger, then to the silver instrument still turning, still dull. I will handle this, Dumbledore said softly. Harry's pulse jumped. Sir. Dumbledore raised a hand, stopping him gently. You did a brave thing tonight, Dumbledore said. But bravery, when mixed with secrets, can become recklessness. Harry's mouth went dry. Dumbledore's eyes met his. You're carrying something. Harry's blood went cold. His scar tingled. His head throbbed. Dumbledore didn't say Loki. He didn't say trickster. He didn't say not James and Lily. He simply looked at Harry like he could see the outline of the mask, even if he couldn't yet see the face beneath it. Be careful, Dumbledore said quietly, because there are minds in this castle that will happily wear you as a costume. Harry's throat tightened. I don't want. Dumbledore's expression softened. One is not always what matters. And then before Harry could speak again, Dumbledore turned away from him. Not to grab the ledger. To lift his wand. He traced a slow, deliberate circle in the air, murmuring a spell so old Harry couldn't understand the words. A soft glow formed around the ledger, thin as spider silk, bright as moonlight. A containment. A net. Harry felt the air ease slightly, like something had been pushed back. Dumbledore's shoulders relaxed a fraction. But Harry knew better. Predators didn't vanish. They just moved. The tricksters count a move. The next morning, Hogwarts woke up to a new story. It wasn't about Michael Corner's double tie anymore. It wasn't about the burned arm. It wasn't even about Hufflepuff's withdrawal. It was about Harry. It began with a whisper at breakfast. Did you hear? Hear what? Potter was caught out of bed last night. By who? Filch says the headmaster himself caught him. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table, spoon hovering over his porridge. Ron stared at him. What? Hermione's face went pale. Harry. Harry's stomach dropped. He hadn't told anyone. Dumbledore hadn't told anyone. So how? Harry's scar tingled faintly. He knew how. The castle had eyes everywhere. Portraits. Ghosts. Armor. Peeves. And worse, someone who could write rumors like scripture. Riddle. Harry felt ice in his veins. By lunch, the rumor was sharper. Potter was sneaking into the library. No into the restricted section. No into the headmaster's office. No, he was meeting someone. By dinner, the rumor had teeth. Potter's the one sabotaging. Potter's the one moving books. Potter's the one messing with the houses. It didn't matter how absurd it was. It had the one ingredient Hogwarts always swallowed greedily. A famous name. Ron slammed his goblet down at dinner, furious. This is rubbish. Hermione's voice was tight. Someone is directing this. Harry sat very still, heart pounding, because he could feel it. The rumor wasn't spreading randomly. It was being steered, and the steering didn't feel like his own magic. It felt like ink. Belmano. Written. At the Ravenclaw table, Lisa Turpin whispered with two other Ravenclaws, eyes flicking to Harry like he was a suspect in a case they'd already decided. At the Slytherin table, Draco smiled like he'd been given a gift. Adrian Pusey leaned back in his seat, watching Harry openly now, eyes glittering with interest. Hufflepuff's Hufflepuffs looked wary, like they didn't know whether to hate Harry or feel sorry for him. Hannah Abbott's gaze met Harry's for a brief second. There was no accusation in her eyes, just exhaustion, like she'd run out of kindness to spend. Harry's stomach twisted. Riddle had done it. Riddle had turned Harry into the perfect distraction. Because now everyone was watching Harry, which meant no one was watching the real game. Dumbledore tests without accusing. After dinner, Harry was summoned. Not publicly, quietly. A prefect approached him in the corridor. "The headmaster would like to see you," she said stiffly. Ron immediately stood. "I'm coming." The prefect shook her head. "Just Potter." Hermione's eyes flashed with worry. "Harry." "I'll be fine," Harry lied softly. He followed the prefect through winding halls to Dumbledore's office. The gargoyle jumped aside with a secret password. Harry stepped inside, heart hammering. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, hands folded. Fawkes the Phoenix watched from his perch, eyes bright and ancient. The air in the office felt calm. Not safe. Calm like water over deep rock. "Harry," Dumbledore said gently. Harry swallowed. "Sir." Dumbledore gestured to a chair. Harry sat. Dumbledore didn't ask about the rumor. Not directly. He asked something else. "Have you ever felt," Dumbledore said softly, "that people expect you to be something before you decide who you are?" Harry's throat tightened. "Yes," Harry whispered. Dumbledore nodded, eyes kind. "That expectation is a powerful enchantment." Harry's scar tingled faintly. Dumbledore's gaze held him steady. "Someone is using that enchantment against you now." Harry's stomach dropped. So Dumbledore knew. Or suspected. Harry swallowed hard. "Who?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled faintly, but there was no humor. "That is what we are discovering." Harry's hands clenched on the chair arms. Dumbledore's voice remained gentle. "Tell me, Harry, when you heard the rumor today, what did you want to do?" Harry's mouth went dry. What did he want to do? He wanted to fix it. He wanted to control it. He wanted to nudge minds, soften voices, twist attention away from him. He wanted to do exactly what Loki's blood whispered he could do. Harry swallowed hard. "I wanted to make it stop," Harry said. Dumbledore nodded slowly. "And did you?" Harry stared at his lap. "No." Dumbledore's expression softened. "Good." Harry blinked up, startled. Dumbledore's eyes were steady. Because the moment you try to force a story to change, you become part of the ink that writes it. Harry's scar tingled. Harry's throat tightened. "Then what do I do?" Dumbledore's gaze flicked to Fawkes, then back. "You do what you did last night," Dumbledore said softly. "You choose to be human." Harry's breath caught. Dumbledore leaned forward slightly, voice low. "There are powers in this castle that would love to pull you into their orbit." Harry's stomach clenched. "And there are powers," Dumbledore continued, "that would love to see you fall, because if you fall, everyone else feels justified in their hatred." Harry swallowed hard. Dumbledore's eyes held him. So you will do something difficult, Harry, Dumbledore said gently. You will let them suspect you. Harry's blood went cold. What? Dumbledore's voice stayed calm. Not forever, not without protection, but long enough for the true hand to reveal itself. Harry's stomach twisted. That sounded like strategy. That sounded like chess. That sounded like the exact kind of thinking Harry was trying to escape. And yet, Harry remembered Terry Boots' burned arm, Susan's trembling hands, Hannah's ruined sprouts. If letting the rumor burn for a while caught the one feeding it. Maybe that was the only way. Harry swallowed, voice rough. And if I can't handle it? Dumbledore's eyes softened. Then you will not handle it alone. Harry felt something in his chest loosen slightly. Not trust. Not yet. But less loneliness. Dumbledore rose and walked to a cabinet behind his desk. He opened it and drew out a small object, silver, simple, a pendant on a chain. He placed it on the desk in front of Harry. A charm, Dumbledore said, not to hide you, to anchor you. Harry stared at it. Anchor? Dumbledore nodded gently. Some magic works by pulling attention. This will help you remember your own mind is your own. Harry's fingers hovered over the pendant. His scar tingled faintly. Harry swallowed. Why are you helping me? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled softly. Because someone must. Harry's throat tightened. He picked up the pendant. It was warm. Not hot. Warm like sunlight on skin. And for the first time in weeks, the pressure behind his eyes eased slightly. Like a hand had been lifted off his thoughts. Harry's breath caught. Dumbledore watched him. Wear it. Harry nodded. He slipped it under his robe. The warmth settled against his chest like a small, steady heartbeat. The silent victor. Harry left the office feeling steadier. Not safe. Not free. But steadier. And that made him dangerous in a different way. Because when Harry returned to the corridors, he felt it again. Eyes on him. Whispers. People pulling away. People staring. The rumor had turned him into a ghost everyone could see. But now he had an anchor. Now he could endure being watched without immediately reaching for manipulation. He walked through the hallways, shoulders straight, face calm. He let them whisper. He let them stare. Because Dumbledore was right about one thing. If someone was writing this story, they would eventually want to admire their own handwriting. And that meant they would make a move. Harry reached the Gryffindor common room late. Ron leapt up immediately. What did he say? Hermione stood too, eyes searching Harry's face. Are you in trouble? Harry shook his head slowly. No, Harry said quietly. Not yet. Ron frowned. That's not reassuring. Harry forced a small smile. It's honest. Hermione's eyes narrowed. Harry, what's going on? Harry hesitated. He couldn't tell them everything. Not yet. But he could tell them one thing, one truth that mattered. Someone is using the school, Harry said softly. Using the houses. Using rumors. Ron's face hardened. Who? Harry looked at the fire, then up at his friends. I don't know, Harry said. Then, very quietly, because it felt like naming a storm on the horizon. But I'm going to find out. End of year 1, book 1 hook. That night, alone in his bed, Harry's scar tingled faintly. He touched it, breathing slowly. The pendant under his robe warmed against his chest. And in the quiet, he felt something else far away, faint, like ink drying on a page. A satisfied presence. Because Riddle had succeeded in one thing. He'd made Harry step onto the same board. Not as a child pulled along by rumors, but as a player. Harry stared into the dark. He didn't feel like the boy who lived. He didn't feel like Loki's son. He felt like someone standing between two monsters, one laughing, one smiling without warmth. And he knew, with cold clarity, that Hogwarts was no longer a school. It was a kingdom. and someone had started writing laws in bloodless ink. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoyed this video.